right, yeah, no, I'll grab these. That's the one that I have that published. That's the
Warm out there
posture. Oh, out there.
Yeah, I think so. And there's a lot of hot air in here too.
While sitting in the back,
My luggage has to have a chair. Why don't I ask?
Okay, ask what they
Excuse me. It's up to us.
Well, you know what? I'll set you one. I'll set it up and then
Okay.
you do what else.
Soft chair.
Here, I brought this in case you haven't seen it. All right, so Kathy, that's a no. That's a no. Do you have a projector?
We do.
Oh, okay. Okay, we do. I
Yeah,
have a
we
projector.
brought it, we just don't want to take extra time.
Yeah, I mean, I think
If people want to look at paper, we could do it that way. We're easy and prepared. Too good at it.
you want to start and then
Yeah.
I'll get it set up if you want.
Am I supposed to? I have to wait for somebody to say something.
Am I blocking anybody from there?
Well, let's let Bill know. Don't open the door now.
This is our new window.
Just waiting for Sally.
Hello, how are you? It's our window display.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we have a window, and that's our ad. That's our
Inviting for a while. Inviting for a
This is
while.
our first one meeting. Well,
That's it, just one.
we missed you.
Shows that-
22-hour meeting.
Yeah, it's been done in a minute.
Hiding in plain sight.
Oh,
She's having some technical issues.
What?
Sally's having some technical issues she can't get.
They're still. Oh my God, did you see that terrible thing? This artist used brown craft.
No.
Said, I didn't
That's okay. We have to get going. I'm sorry. That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Good evening. This is the October 28th, regular 2019, regular Mayor and Common Council of the Borough for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, please.
Mayor Driver?
Here.
Mr. Goshner?
Here.
Ms. Charles McCormick?
Here.
Mr. Gorman?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Peterson? Here. Mr. Runyon?
Good evening, everybody. Start with the mayor's report. No, actually, we have the special improvement budget first. Thank you.
Sure. Would you, oops, I don't know what that was. How much time would you like me to take?
No more than 30 minutes.
Oh, really?
For 15.
That's good. Let's go with 15. Okay, so we presented our PowerPoint of 2019 accomplishments and 2020 looking forward board goals and achievements. And I have a copy of it over there if anybody wants to see it. And that ties into this budget, which, as you'll note, I gave you a comparison from last year's budget to this year's budget. So what you see in the 2019 column is what was approved by this council last year. And the 2020 numbers are something our board spent a lot of time talking about. And sure.
I'm trying, sorry folks. But, I also have paper copies if anybody wants a paper copy.
We have paper copies.
Thank you.
I told you we are prepared. And what was the word I used? Oh, that's good too, I like that. Okay, so we start with the total, our total revenue, has gone, our total revenue in our anticipated budget, which is always, realistic and aspirational at the same time, and we hope conservative, has us raising more revenue in grants and sponsorships, and I feel confident as somebody who's done similar jobs in similar locations that I can raise more money. I'm not suggesting that we work with less money, but I feel that we need to raise more money because I believe that we should have a wish list of really important things, whether that's a trolley or a rail trail or something else, and we should be able to fund the things that we haven't already been able to fund. And grants, it's very likely that our organization can apply for grants and receive them. With the mayor's help, we got a $10,000 grant from the freeholders this past year for the Opportunity Zone marketing, and it was really well spent. And you know, other areas in Henry County apply for grants and get them, so we just need to be a little more assertive. Oh, Curtis. Really?
Good job.
That is
Yes.
not my good angle.
They're
Okay.
all good angles.
No. All right. So our net revenue is more aggressive, and our total expenses is a little higher as well. And what the difference is about almost $8,000, which is conservative. It's a conservative difference. But I feel that that's probably really appropriate, and hopefully we'll make more money and spend less and have more reserve. But as a nonprofit, we don't really need a huge reserve. We are supposed to spend the money we get. Okay. Therefore, we move to revenue. So this year's revenue is $558,000. It's conservatively up a little bit. We have the rollover from the previous year. We have the assessment, the rollover from the previous year, which is what is in the bank at the end of the year, in the fourth quarter. Sponsorships, again, I said that is increased, and earned revenue, which is grants, t-shirts. We had a very democratic VIP section at our jazz festival. It was the same area as if you brought a chair. We didn't put VIPs ahead of people who brought their own chair, but we did charge $10 a chair, which for somebody who didn't have a plate, who didn't bring a seat, was a kind of a welcome opportunity. Called us, $10 chair for a VIP is a good deal. So I think there are clever opportunities where we can make more money to have more of the things on our wish list. Okay, so that brings us to, do you want me to go through this whole thing and then ask questions, or ask questions as we go? I'll keep going. Okay. Economic development is what we call all the stuff that falls under economic development. The things in yellow, which I don't know if you get a colored copy, the things with the asterisks, like courthouse development and slash events, we added money back into this budget for more events at the courthouse and more music on Main Street, because I know, we all know that we have a economy on our historic Main Street that is unfortunately more event-based than foot traffic-based. And we heard that when we didn't have events, it had a really negative impact on our businesses. And I think on our community as well. So now that the streetscape is finished, we added more funds back for that. Everything else is pretty much on par. I took out money for the movie theater because I don't think that's on the top of our wish list at the moment. I did add some money for connectivity projects because I firmly believe that, you know, we had 1,000, how many people? 600 kids?
600 families.
600 families at the shops of Flemington, spectacular this weekend. You know, I really would have liked to have had a big sign that said, where do you get your coffee? You know, where do you buy your dog stuff? Because I don't know that those customers really come downtown. And I think we need some kind of a campaign to share customers between our three main areas. The shopping plazas, which attract, you know, one group of customers, our historic downtown, and our sort of Stengel, Liberty Village, Central Avenue, Mine Street, turntable area, which hopefully will coalesce as a great shopping attraction area as there's development over there. We also added a little money for historic tours. We paid to have a new tour written, and we'd like to do 4 tours a month, but that requires paying a tour guide. So that's that section. Visual improvements, we give storefront improvement grants, which I and our visual improvement committee believes we might want to not do as facades, because facades are generally much larger projects, and $1,500 it doesn't get you very far. However, for $1,500 you could get a really beautiful sign for your business that follows our sign ordinances. So we would like to allot the $15,000 that we have for visual improvement grants to sign improvements. I put $20,000 for banners, signage, and wayfinding. So that means getting the large maroon metal wayfinding signs off of the posts after we've had a community charrette where there's 65 of them. So we put all 65, you know, photocopies around the room. We really look at what they all say. We look at where they are all located. We look at the condition of the pole and the base, because some are in really bad shape. Some are really dangerous. And then we figure out what should these signs be pointing people to, because right now they're pointing them to Flemington Firs and Liberty Village. And as we just discussed in the hallway, we need to all get in a room and work this stuff out, and hopefully come up with a great design that can be changed, because we know change is inevitable. You know, things are going to come and go, and our signage needs to be a little more flexible than what we currently have. Which is nuts and bolts and metal that can be changed.
You can't leave it at 65.
We get
Like,
We have 65. We have 65, and we've inventoried all of them, so we have a map of where they all are, and we have pictures of, again, what the sign says, what the pole and the base look like, and, you know, this will be our top of mind project, is to get the signage fixed as quickly as possible, because it does say that we're we're not paying attention to, or, you know, it says something, but whatever it is, it's not what it should say. Okay, so beautification projects, it says planters, because we have inherited the planters. At this moment in time, a planting is $60 a planter. That's more expensive than it was in the past, because in the past we had 200 planters. So just remember, these things cost a lot of money, and we've shopped around for the best prices, and the reality is, very few people want to do, our beautiful plantings, our canna plants, somebody needs to put them in cold storage over the winter. They've been planted and brought back out for 15 years, and it's really hard to find a grower who has the storage to store, 75 canna plants in the basement. We've called everybody, so yes. And Garden Shed finally agreed. I called and cried, and they took us back after they broke up with us twice. And Susan knows, and Jeffrey knows. It's not easy. So anyway, we will have plants, but that's what they cost. Marketing and advertising is a big lump sum. I reduced our costs a little bit just because we've been effective in some areas, and some of our costs are, we do more online, it's less expensive than some print budgets. And administration, I have lowered our staff salaries because, not that I don't think we deserve more, because I really do, I think we work a lot and we do deserve more, but we have been able to make some efficiencies as well, and I think that's a good staff number for us. And our operations are what they are. We have to pay for rent and storage. The 56 Adirondack chairs have to go into storage to go somewhere, and that's, they don't fold. They're big and heavy, and kind of a pain. Our insurance costs keep going up. The bigger our events, the more our insurance is going to cost us, and quite frankly, our corn, tomato, and beer expenses were completely reasonably $10,000 more than last year because of event insurance. Event insurance for 12,000 people is really different than what it was in the past. And the same thing with our police and fire, DPW, renting tents, talent. It's all very expensive. But do I believe that we can recoup some of this expense? I do, but we kind of have to have a different model, and our model has been not charging people what other people charge them, and I don't think we're in that position anymore. We've proven that we're going to have 12,000 people. We should be able to charge what other people charge, and get with the rest, get in step with everybody else. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that we charge stakeholders, if the policy is stakeholders shouldn't be charged, we can talk about that, but outside vendors to come for almost nothing doesn't really make sense. So that leads us to professional services, and the story there is that our accounting, legal, HR, auditing, and external bookkeeping fees are up, and I think that's all really just good business practice. Is to spend, that's where you need to spend your money, to make sure that you're spending your money correctly. So that's really it. I'm open to any questions.
Marshall?
The line under expenses for Pat Conradin Tech Innovation went down
Yes.
from 25 to 1,000. What's in that line and why the reduction?
I don't really know how much I spoke to Mark about it today, I don't know how, they're changing their model a little bit. But it's a strange, I understand why we did it initially, but it's not, it's at the high school. It hasn't only been high school kids, it's been a mix of professionals. And the truth is, they really have funding in other places.
And health and wellness, similar story?
Health and wellness, we really need to, we're the healthiest county in New Jersey. We have a lot of really good messaging, but spending money on a health and wellness event hasn't panned out as great as we thought it was going to. So I think we just need to really think about how we do that. We really, we had like 50 exercise classes all over the place, and it was just kind of like people didn't really get it. I'd rather just promote our healthiness and make sure that the people who live here know what the options are and do that regularly than make it like a health week. I think it's
Tables and chairs.
I am 6 months in here, so I hesitate to answer that question without really knowing what people want. But I think we can come up with the right number and the right mix of tables and chairs. And again, a lot of this is infrastructure. There are things, there's a bar that is going out of business in New Hope that has, high tops. We rent high tops every time we go to do something because we don't have
That
storage.
option's going on online right now. You should get
I
it.
know. So, some of it is just, I think we should be smarter about the infrastructure. Yes.
People would really love, having tables and chairs at the event. And I know I suggested to former mayor, that maybe we could get a large storage unit and put it in one of the municipal parking lots somewhere. I know DPW has done that because they needed a little more space. But I think that is money really, really well spent to have, some, at least a beginning collection of outside furniture.
And if you drive through New Haven and a couple other places, they have these great cafe, sort of bistro, yellow metal chairs. I don't know if you've seen them. But there's a lot of stuff that's lightweight, that folds, that's intended to be taken out and brought back in.
Yeah, I mean, you could even put the sleigh there that we use for the courthouse steps as well. But I think you really need a storage unit. You could even put the Adirondack chairs in there as well. Because I remember some of the fees for storage were really, really high.
My hope, which I guess I'm allowed to hope, right? My hope is that we is one that as I get more time here, I can make relationships with people who have space and will let it, like Red Vanilla said, we could use, his space is not being used, there's no intention for it to be used, we could use his storage, which is great because he already has the metal shelves and everything else. So I think we should hopefully be able to broker storage space with our stakeholders. But my hope is that for the Adirondack chairs that we might have space to display them in the winter too. So that they don't have to go get deep sixed in cold storage, but actually we could set them up someplace and let people sit in them.
Yeah, like at Stangle, they could be on the side of the wall easily. Can I ask my other question?
Sure.
Okay. I do think the $5,000 for the music on Main is a little bit low if you are going to do it every other Thursday, because some of the bands want $1,000.
Yeah.
But you can make money at that event if you bring in like a wine vendor. I know that people really liked that, having it there. Also, the filling station. I noticed that stayed about the same, and I noticed all summer the Saturday nights were really quiet.
Yeah.
But you're planning on keeping it open Friday and Saturday?
So, what did I write? anybody read what I wrote?
Special social events. I didn't know if you were. going to-
Outdoor patio
Outdoor patio.
to be used in 2020, that was supposed to be regular leave for special social events. So in the event that this filling station gets sold, I have my eye on a particular turntable in the neighborhood that should be an important place, that could be an outdoor patio with lawn chairs and some activity, the turntable
Yes.
itself.
Yeah.
I think the filling station is a great concept and that it proved itself for how it was intended. But this summer, we found that we had very few people on Saturday nights. So our busiest night was 500 people and Oktoberfest. Those were our two busiest nights, and Oktoberfest was really fun, right? So I think whatever we do, I don't think we're meant to be the regular weekend community watering hole event. I think it should be for special events, but that we should have something that sort of serves a filling station purpose. And the early summer and the late summer, early fall is probably better than Saturday nights during the summer.
It'll be cooler, like, in the fall,
Totally.
for sure.
It's
Yeah.
more fun, there's more people around, there's not that many people here on Saturday nights in the summer, unfortunately.
Also, the trolley, wouldn't that be a lot more than $5,000?
This is, I believe I wrote test the trolley.
Oh, test it, okay.
So my
Alright, so you're
feeling,
gonna rent
so
it.
there are people who are interested in partnering on a trolley, like Northlands and Diamond Nation, the shops at Flemington. They see the value of having like a hop on, hop off. Not like a link system, but like on the weekends, you park your car at the shops at Flemington or Liberty Village or wherever you park your car, and you buy something and maybe that gives you a discounted ticket to get on and off. And the whole time we're giving a tour on the trolley. We, not Kathy. Kathy, don't worry. Andy, don't worry.
But
We're not the trolley people.
In
What?
other words, if Diamond Nation is gonna give you money for a trolley, we're not necessarily driving the trolley to Diamond Nation. They could just, advertise on the side or something?
Well, possibly. It might be worth it. I was at Massachusetts Diamond Nation. My kid played baseball. Our team came here. We went to Maggiano's for dinner. You know what I mean? Like, we did not, nobody came and said, hey, the most adorable town that looks like nothing like you've seen in Massachusetts is waiting for you with open arms. So, we might want to pick up people there. Again, this is all really speculative because we don't own a trolley. And a trolley is about $800 to run for 4 hours. So we figured we would test it by having some special weekends and see if it's something that, does it work? Is it something people are interested in?
Does that include the driver?
Yes.
Okay,
Remember
that's not
that's the yeah, there is a trolley for sale, in Milford, that's like $30,000. So we could buy these things. It's possible that Northlands might want to buy the trolley and we would work something out with them. But I think but the main concept is there are people who aren't coming to downtown historic Flemington, and we kind of have to go the extra mile to show that we're welcoming and to tell them why we're so special, and to also get them from one, because right now we don't have that density of business where they can just stroll around, we hand them a map, they stroll around and figure it out. We kind of have to curate the experience for them. That's what I think. Yes.
More businesses.
Could you use the microphone, please?
No, I'll just speak louder, but thank you. So more businesses attract more people.
Correct.
And currently, the costs for FCP are passed on to our business owners. So obviously, if we would have more business owners, with the benefits. We all want that.
Yeah.
Is there an interest from you or from the board to explore the redevelopment areas throughout the borough? And also, as we know with studies are a challenge, and we do lots of one-off studies, something comprehensive, so we can have a strategy for those studies and also a strategy regarding that traffic, so we can see things that are working.
Absolutely. And I think we're due for a master plan, right? So I think we're, yes, I think that's.
I think FCP needs to have a role.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Any other questions from up here? Any questions from the public? Lois?
Lois Stewart, Flemington Borough. I was wondering, do the specifics of the proposed expenditures come to the council for approval?
Yes. So that's why I'm here. Tonight.
If you decide you're gonna run a trolley or something.
Sure.
Right here, or if you decide to do music on Main Street, I don't know that.
No. No,
Not
once the
really.
budget's approved, it's
We approve a
approved.
budget, we run with it.
But I'm generally very collaborative and like a lot of input, so I'm happy to hear what people think is and again, I'm new, I don't know the past history of music on Main
Well, I would like to make a comment about that because this town always had it on Thursday nights, as I've spoken to you
You told me.
before. And not only does the county have their big music thing up at Deerfield, but I understand that Milford has something on Thursday nights too. So it seems like we're shooting ourselves in the foot to just be determined to have it on Thursday nights in spite of the competition.
I don't think that's been determined yet, though. What night it would be.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't
It's-
think it's a good idea to have it on Thursday nights as it's always been in the past because of the
Definitely.
competition.
I think we should get a lot of input and then just find the path of the greatest good.
And then I also wanted to ask about anything that you're doing that would address the cleanliness of the town. You have beautification, but if I walk down the street and there's all this litter on the sidewalk, the litter seems to take my attention more than the beautiful flowers.
Yep.
So is there some way that you can incorporate cleanliness into the beautification?
It's certainly in the ordinance that birthed the bid, that we can make that a priority. From everything I've heard, that hasn't been the priority up until this point, but it's something we can certainly discuss and keep in mind. We just, the only thing is we just have one amount of money and we slice and dice from there, so. But if that's a strong priority, maybe we take from something else and, do some cleaning up.
Well, I just think that should be a high priority, because if somebody comes into a town that's dirty and dilapidated, and why are they gonna stay regardless of the
I
beautiful
couldn't agree with
flowers?
you more.
And so I think we need to give more priority to keeping our town clean and attractive.
My sentiments exactly.
Those areas where new trees are planted, larger,
Yeah.
is there any way like you can mulch over that?
So that's the plan, Tony, that's not really their responsibility, that's in the
Yeah,
state.
you mentioned,
Yeah, no,
maybe
there's mulch.
mulch over that.
Once the
Kinda
37
looks a little.
Do you have any questions about the budget, the SUP budget?
No, I'm just thankful that, you're gonna try to trolley the people into town.
The one thing that I was gonna say that years ago, not 100 years ago, but a few years ago,
It's failing years.
we had music on Main Street, we used to have it downtown there by Coco's, back then. I think the hotel was still open back in those days, and we set up tables in the street and the bandstand and all that, but we rented it, and it was very expensive. So that kind of died out after a year, so you can buy equipment in stores somewhere, definitely be a plus. plus.
Yes, it would.
I agree.
Any other questions? Mr. Shore?
So, I see this budget and immediately questioning what's the long-term plan, what's the short-term. And I think that it's important to really work on the long-term as well as the short-term. I don't see really much in here about the long-term. I think it's important to incorporate a viable strategy to stimulate the redevelopment or revitalization, which I believe should be redevelopment centric. And I'm very supportive of this council, and one of the tourism council people suggested that there be a survey or study done for all the areas in need of redevelopment, and that being done by an independent, separate planning professional, FCT would hire, and let that company go out and determine which sites are meet the criteria for redevelopment. Because this town needs triage, as I've said many, many times in the past. And the best triage you can do is to get redevelopment and do it immediately, and to give out pilots to it. The reason pilots are so important is all the tax revenue, almost all the tax revenue, comes right to the borough.
If you have a question about the budget?
So, well, my question is where's the long-term plan? So, that's rhetorical, actually, but it is a question. And then as far as the short-term goes, I mean, have you considered using storage trailers? They're very affordable. In this town, it's okay to just park them in a parking lot anywhere you want. So why don't we just get one for the FCP and put it right next to the DPW trailers? I mean, they look like. But add one more to the few that we have, doesn't really matter. So, have you thought about putting in, using the courthouse in the county, or partly with the county, where the county would allow us to play a film about Flemington? So people come here and they can see this film, and you can direct them from your tourism office. Which I don't see anything in here around having an office for works.
I'm so sad that you missed my presentation, because I did cover much of this last week.
I'm sorry too, I was in a
That's
much
okay.
nicer place.
Well, I will hand you a copy of it so you can look at it, but what I have said, which I feel very strongly about, is that the FCP needs to be have a visitor center. We need to invite people in and give them our materials and welcome them, and a film or making the courthouse. I believe that's there's a big grant to change to do more services with the courthouse, and I did put an extra $1,000 in the budget that's just called courthouse development / events. So
The
it's not
county
a lot of money.
the county has also created a tourism commission.
That's true too.
No, and that will encompass the entire county.
And we did apply for, in partnership, the borough, the economic development team, and the chamber applied for $100,000 grant from the New Jersey PBA for the Opportunity Zone Challenge Fund, and we did ask for money for charrettes and more guided conversations about development and redevelopment and planning.
Have you given any consideration to fast tracking some of these ideas around rail trails, around tours? I think tours are great. We should have cemetery tours, house tours. We should have car rallies here, and all this stuff should be, I think, incorporated into the budget now. I mean, the way the budget's written, I don't see what's the short-term stuff that we're trying to do. We have to plan to make an experience to come to Flemington. There's very little assets here to really experience, so we have to, capitalize on the ones we have, but then also create these other ones.
It really is built in here to the budget, which would be, I think, better addressed by that strategic plan. But I think at this point, we're not going, a rail trail is going to take planning and time, and unfortunately some environmental studies because they're railroad tracks. So, you know, it's a process, but I am asking for the money to start slowly and thoughtfully figuring out what the steps are. I shouldn't say this because I may live to regret this, but if you give me $5,000 to do a study on something, I've been successful in the past to raise $100,000 to make it happen. But you know, we only have a certain amount of money. I think if I could write a budget for $1 million, but I don't think anyone in this room would be happy if I did that. So I think we just have to, you know, we're still working in the parameters that have been set comparable to 2019. And, you know, I'm hoping we'll be really successful and we can have a wish list and triple our income very quickly.
So the issue I have with
So,
with the
hang on,
budget.
so this is not the public hearing, Robert, and we do have a public hearing that
Okay,
will
this
be
is on the
happen
budget.
after the resolution.
So what this is a discussion around the budget. So I am not happy with this budget, and I feel that it's important that you hear my opinion on it,
Okay, that's
and
fine.
everybody here.
That's fine. But we do have the public hearing scheduled on December 9th for the
Well, you know, the
budget.
problem with this whole way of operating is that it's the second reading of the budget. You guys are going to pass it, they're going to want to pass it. And now is the time to be making the comments so the budget can get changed where it's going to be palatable to everyone else. The way it is right now, sorry FCP, I'm not satisfied. And as a citizen and as a huge taxpayer and funder of the bid, I want to be heard.
In support of your statements, we only just received this.
Well, fair enough, but the point is, we're discussing it. And what I'd like to see is a little less, fewer events, because you spend the money on these events, we're spending big dollars on events, and there's no lasting effect to them. Whereas some of the other things I just mentioned, car rallies, historic tours, cemetery tours, films, visitor center, those things are enduring. They're not one-offs. They're constant. And they're things that can be independent. So we need to be smart about how we're spending our money, because I'm investing a hell of a lot of money in Flemington, and I want to know that my investment is creating more assets, not one-off corn here, tomato, and vodka, whatever the hell it was this year. That's where I'm at.
So I would just, I'd like to direct everyone in the room to take the opportunity. I think we're going to post it.
It's posted.
And I think the plan couples well.
Tim?
The plan is addresses how the budget is structured to support the plan, and many of the components that the audience are asking for are outlined in the plan. So I think, and certainly review that and then come back and when we have an open forum to talk about it. I think that would be much more, the fact that the plan was already presented, I think is problematic for this discussion. So.
We serve many masters and everyone has ideas and feels that their need is the greatest need. Unfortunately, we've received teary phone calls from business owners almost every day for 3 months. We've had people call us crying to say they're going out of business, and some of them did, you know. So unfortunately, when you don't have density of people and you don't have density of businesses, you have to, people live by events, because we actually have to import people to an event, to an attraction. I'm all for regular attractions, less one-off events, 100%. But, you know, we kind of unfortunately have to do a combination just to keep everyone going.
So there's the question is procedure. What's the?
So generally, this is a first reading and it should not be the public comment, but because we had people hear about it, I wanted to give that opportunity.
Sure.
But we should not be spending all evening doing it because we do have a public hearing.
Gotcha. And where is this
That will be on
plan?
December 9th, assuming that it passes on the first reading tonight.
Where is this plan posted?
So if you go to loveflemington.com, is it under About
Board and
Us?
governance.
Board and Governance. There's a section called Board and Governance. You'll find the budget and the plan that I presented that last 2 weeks ago.
Loveflemington.com?
Yeah.
This is
Board and Governance.
It's a budget, it's a resolution, but it was done twice.
That was my,
Resolution gets read twice.
that was my,
One other quick question.
Sure.
The walking tour guides, are they volunteers or do you have to pay people? I mean, they're only getting paid
We
like
pay
$35?
We pay so that number is $30 for a walking tour, times 4 walking tours times 4 walking tours a month times 8 months.
And do people who take that tour, are they allowed to tip those people?
They do.
Like they do in
Yes.
Europe where they have.
And by the way, at $10, we're charging $10, so there's income and expense. There was, I think I had $1,000 in expense to raise $4,000. But for $10, I saw a lot of drag along husbands and boyfriends who were like, I want to watch a football game, what am I doing here? But, you know, it's a low price. If you're sitting at home, you know, it's great, it's affordable. And the tour is wonderful, it really is.
Based on Councilman Dashman's question, I know we're treating this as though it were an ordinance. As a budget item, we're also holding a resolution. So if we are to approve this now, and subsequently there were changes for it to pass, we would then need to start over again?
There are advertisement, requirements
Right.
that have to be met.
so the resolution language that said,
Yeah, I have to advertise it for December 9th, but the notice has to run 10 days before the public hearing.
right.
No later than 10 days before
And the budget
public
has to be made available a certain number of days before, is that what I'm understanding?
So if things were to change, I would have to re-advertise the.
So when would it change if that's the case?
So we don't have to do a first reading again if a line item changes? That's the question.
I would think if it's a substantial change, you'd have to reintroduce it. I would think, wouldn't that be the same?
This is the
approach?
initial, this is what you're being asked to consider. If there's changes, if there's things that are going to modify things, you have an opportunity between the next event to do that. Before it's advertised, correct, Sally?
December 9th.
Well, there's a year, so you've got to, so I guess
10
the
days
calendar,
before that,
so the calendar, might be, I guess the calendar question is,
Okay, there's two things. The calendar, I mean, because it's a budget,
yes.
you have to allow 28 days before the introduction to the public hearing. It has to be at least 28 days.
Okay,
So you can't schedule a public hearing until the December meeting,
right,
because the November one's too soon.
okay.
I also have to advertise the budget at least 10 days before the public hearing.
So we could introduce it on first reading, make some changes to it, based on what we're hearing from folks, and then still be within that timeline, as long as by, say, you know, the 3rd week in November or something, we had those changes. That's-
Greg Bill?
It's my favorite part of
And I love that he comes out, he holds the door while he's standing there. He's ready to go back.
So ready to run.
Man behind us, the curtain.
I know. Hey, Tim. Yes, Tim. I have it over there. What I showed you. Yeah. You can just pass it if anybody wants to.
It's a percentage, is it, okay.
Would it be,
It's that dollar thing, like if it's more than 10% of one item, or X percent of the whole thing.
but wouldn't it, would that be like different line items? Because ultimately, the assessment doesn't change, that's the reason.
Yeah, because you're reducing one budget line by, say, $10,000 and increasing another one by 10 if it's more than a percentage of that line.
Okay, I want to make a motion to table this.
We can't though.
Yeah,
Why
it's
can't
not
we take?
Because the November 19th meeting is not 30 days in
We
advance.
we take the borough budget, we take that right into the new year, months into the new year, before it's introduced. What would happen if this were taken now, so that if there are, because I'm already hearing enough concerns about changes, so that we could get those changes into the next one. If that means that ultimately the second reading of a better budget, a clearer budget, one that addresses these concerns, happens after the first.
This is a
Yeah.
resolution, this is not an ordinance.
They can't.
So the resolution must be within the calendar year or within 1 year span? That's
It'll
my
be a
question.
different council.
The ordinance
Yes,
says.
but this council has inherited a charge from past councils. That's not a reasonable argument.
I think the ordinance says it has to be determined before the end of the year.
And in terms of your concerns about significant changes, what are they?
I've heard enough. I understand. I'm being told now that it must be done this year. So it's a shame that it's coming to us now, so that we're saying, oh, at the end of time, we must proceed this way. I'm saying, to be reasonable, this is an important budget. It has an impact on businesses, it has an impact on the entire community, and we have our fiscal budget for the entire municipality, which we have no problem with spending months into it. So I guess I'm questioning, why are we receiving this so late?
The ordinance says that you get it in October and that it has to be determined by the end of the year. And this is the way it's been done, to the best of my knowledge, every year.
Well, this is not a criticism.
Yeah, no, I don't
I'm just
feel
looking at something
criticized.
being responsive to.
I know, I'm just giving you what I believe is the procedure.
From everything I'm hearing, we have until before Thanksgiving to make any changes. And we'll
Correct.
still have enough time to get the advertising done.
Assuming we pass
Assuming
the
the
first
changes
reading.
are not, do you want me to
Yeah,
get the
I mean,
listing
I
for
don't-
what the 3 criteria are?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think you're right. So we've got some time.
Well, you got time to make the
Yeah,
changes,
the
but
time to make the changes. we have to
Bill?
introduce it.
if you don't introduce it, then do it later.
Right.
You won't be able to publish
You
it.
have to
What
start
if
the
you
ball rolling
introduce the
tonight,
whole
and then you can
thing?
still make your changes.
What's the rule with that?
I would think if you're adding a new line, item, that's changing the
Well, I mean, we might need some clarity on what our ordinance and what, SITs, how their budgets are governed, because they're 501c3s, but the state law treats them because it's quasi-public. It's in the middle of sorts between these things.
And that's your wheelhouse,
Okay.
isn't it? Does that sound right?
In terms of that, and it's difficult to know what takes precedent in those cases. So I cannot speak off the cuff in terms of and with any
So there was a motion on the table to table it. Is there a second on that?
Or advising for the second to.
it's not. It's not.
And the other thing, because like our budget lines are very specific within those categories, right? And so this is a spreadsheet, right? And it's not, so if economic development is at 129 through 50, and that doesn't change, but within economic development, there are changes in lines. Can we do that, or is it literally the question of 800 or $1,000 for best friends of Flemington? Like, that's the level of detail I want to get to.
Correct.
Well, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think you need to be that specific.
Right,
with
I
your
didn't
line
think that
item.
Granular now.
You can't hear Bill.
He's saying he doesn't think there needs to be that amount of specificity for the line items.
The screen can probably come down. I don't know.
Yeah, as long as the main number stays the same.
Well, no, because there's some sense of line item. So if the expense line that their budget right now is in 6 broad categories: economic development, visual improvements, marketing and advertising, administration, operations, professional services. You're saying that if those lines don't bounce around more than the percentage total, but the sub-expenses within those, we can play, there's probably more room to move those around, is that what you're saying?
Right, like ours, you know, if the
Right.
police department has other expenses, I don't care if it's office supplies or motor vehicle repairs, that can move within that, that doesn't matter.
So if we have to make, yeah, so we've got room, so if we were to do first reading tonight, and we were to say, okay, within, say, economic development, the proposed budget is 129,350, and we were to make a bunch of changes within those line items, but then the new number ends up being $125,000, just a couple $1,000 difference, we're fine doing that.
There's 3 criteria for changes.
Okay.
Okay, you can add a new item of appropriation if it's less than 1% of the total amount of appropriations.
Okay. So anything less than $5,000 we could add.
And you can do this after the public hearing.
You can increase the amount to be raised by taxes by more than 5%. You can't increase the rate to be raised by taxes by more than 5%, but you're not talking about doing that.
Well, their assessment is 362, so that's 3,600, we can't touch that, okay?
And if anything increases or decreases any item of appropriation by more than 10%, you need to get special. You need to change.
Any of the 6 sections?
So any of those 6 sections.
Only the 6 sections.
So visual improvements, which is at 59.5, goes up by, $5,000. More than $5,000, we have a problem. Or less than $5,000, it's, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right? I got the number right? Yeah. Then that's a problem, but within that, we're okay. All right, well then I'm okay moving forward, because then we've got the room to do.
So all you're doing tonight is starting the ball rolling. You're not putting any final seal on anything. There's going to be a public hearing, there's going to be objections and an opportunity to make certain changes.
Then I'm gonna move on, I guess it's moving the resolution for this first time to get the ball started, understanding that we've got this room to make changes within those boundaries.
The motion's to table.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot this.
Okay, I'm sorry, who made the motion to
You made the
table?
motion to table, waiting to hear what you had to say. I'd like to, and I'm just gonna wait on what my
Is there a
colleagues
second?
say.
Is there a second to tabling? I don't hear a second to table
So
this.
I'll retract it, thank you for the
Okay.
discussion.
Is there a motion to adopt on the first, a motion
To
to
introduce.
introduce on the first reading?
I'll move that.
Okay. With the understanding that the public hearing would be December
December 9th,
9th.
and I think it would be helpful if you could confirm when absolutely we needed to have changes so
The
that.
drop dead, so that I can get an ad in the
Drop
paper.
dead.
I
Yeah.
would say by the November meeting.
Well,
Well,
let
you
me,
look at your
can I look
calendar.
at that
Yeah.
and get back to you all on that?
Yeah.
I'll send out an email.
Yeah.
Because there's holidays in there too. so-
There are, yeah.
We have two liaison to the FCP
Right.
currently. So, will you advise the council?
About what?
Or
Yeah,
are you,
there's changes.
if there's changes, that's.
Yes.
So I also, I think we need to be clear in terms of what we are asking for and giving the FCP appropriate time to respond and consider and talk to other stakeholders and things like that.
Right,
So
and what
I
I'd like
would
Can-
want this soon.
Can we finish the introduction vote,
Yes.
and then you guys can
Absolutely.
decide that?
Absolutely.
Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Mr. Ellis McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Okay, so,
So, the public hearing will be on December 9th. I would encourage anybody who has any concerns about the budget or thinks a line item should be changed, please reach out forthwith to the FCP, because they also have to have it approved by their board.
thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to,
Your 15 minutes are up, by the way.
yes, they are. Mayor and council reports, mayor's report. So earlier in executive session, council received a preliminary copy, a draft copy of the Beacon report. It will be presented to the public on November 18th. That meeting will be held in the historic courthouse. Quick streetscape update, as you can see, most of the work is done. The construction stuff going on right now is their takeout, because when they take the curb out, chunks of asphalt come out, so they have a strip that they're doing, which is part of the plan, next to the curb. They dig it up, they go down a few inches, and they repave there to smooth it out and put the, what's that called? The angle, so that water goes properly to the storm drain. No, I'm talking about that strip of asphalt.
For
Next to the
drainage?
curb that they're doing. Over the weekend, worked some more. There was an overlay first reading on the agenda. I did ask Sally to remove that because there were some changes over the weekend, and then neglected to send it to Sally, and I'll take responsibility for that. The overlay. They're up 12, yeah. So there was some other, and just wanting to make sure that it gets out in time. And this is the VAS district of the south side of Route 12. Part of it was originally going to include, as recommended, the whole recommendation from the master plan was to go through the golf course, the driving range. When I talked with the planning folks down in Trenton about it, they said, please don't do that. That is a floodway, and that will cause you all sorts of problems going forward. So I got back to the planner and all that, and so it's just being reworked a little bit. Speaking of going forward, last week I did attend a meeting in Trenton with the representatives from the Office of Planning Advocacy. That's the first step in renewing our center designation. We do have a quasi-center designation that is expiring. This would be a more cohesive, proactive center designation, and a meeting was the first step in doing that. If we get that, the state will avail to us a number of resources for cohesive planning throughout the borough. As Robin mentioned, we are due for a master plan, whether it's a re-examination or a full master plan rework in 2020, and so that will tie in with all of that stuff as well. That same day, a number of representatives from the county and nearby municipalities also met with the DEP about the potential Category 1 streamer designation. I was unable to attend that due to the planning advocacy meeting running much later than I expected. However, our concerns were relayed to them by the county and township, our neighbors in the township as well. There were many texts that were exchanged during that when I got held up in one building and they were meeting in the building next door, and I couldn't get there. On Thursday, I attended a full-day seminar on implementing complete streets in regards to the streets and sidewalks in the borough. In 2014, the borough did adopt a complete streets resolution, but struggled since then in implementing parts of it, and I hope next year, and again, this will go in with a master plan and a circulation element, when we look at that master plan next year, to revisit it and hopefully update that complete streets policy to make our streets accessible to all modes of transportation, all streets and all abilities as well. That's a very important thing. A lot of that is our streetscape was ADA compliance, to bring a lot of our sidewalks up with ADA compliance, and that's what the Complete Streets does. They also offer a technical training, which I've reached out to the chair of the Environmental Commission, because this does come through Sustainable New Jersey as well, to see what we would like to do, if we'd like to avail ourselves and apply for technical training, which I think that we would like to do. That deadline comes up in December. On the 19th of October, volunteers from the fire department and the American Red Cross installed 57 smoke alarms free of charge to homes and apartments in the borough. That covered 30 homes, and those are now 30 homes with brand new smoke detectors, where previously there were none, and that was without charge to the borough. That was a volunteer program, all arranged through the Red Cross and paid for by the Red Cross as well. On the 17th, I attended the Safe in Huntington Candlelight Vigil. Next Tuesday, and we all know, is Election Day. I'd like to wish all the candidates running best of luck in going in that. Also, I'd like to invite everybody to a reception honoring the guy to my left here for 33 years. Council. That will be held Saturday from 3 to 6 p.m. at the Women's Club on Park Avenue. Finally tonight, and this is stuck in Sally's computer, but you'll have to take my words for this here.
Bill is in there trying to
Is in there
resuscitate my
trying to
computer.
resuscitate the computer, and this was not on the agenda because I wanted it to be a surprise to Mr. Gorman. I would like to bestow an honor upon him that will remind us for years to come of his service to the borough and legacy in town. Part of this also got stuck in somebody's car as well. You'll see it on Saturday.
Maybe I'll be stuck in the car.
Yeah, well, it was the best laid plans, kind of, you know, everybody thought they were doing the best thing. So, in talking with DPW, we actually explored whether we could rename a sewer line after him. But after talking it over, we felt that honor needed to be something a little bit bigger. So,
Here's a water line at least.
Water tank.
so therefore, you'll have to take my word for it. As soon as Bill gets it out, he'll print it out and we can share it around and you can see it. I worked very hard on it. Make a motion from the floor if somebody can do this. To give New York Avenue an honorary street designation of John Gorman Way.
So moved.
Is there a second? Amend the agenda to introduce the resolution that's stuck in Sally's computer.
Sally's had a great day today. All right, so we need a motion to amend the agenda to introduce the resolution,
Yes.
right? Can I take the motion and the second from Jeff and Michael for amending the agenda? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Abstain.
So then we have to then make the motion to rename. This is an honorary renaming. It's a blue sign, white on blue. They'll go up tomorrow. They're already in house. So when you come home from the VFW or at the doctor's appointment tomorrow, you shall see them up. And we also have one that you can take home and hang on your kitchen wall. Or your bedroom wall.
Does it have
Maybe
to be-
above your...
Has to be approved by the HPC though.
Can we get
We have
that
that.
on PC map?
So this is not a permanent, this is just a blue sign, it's an honorary. It's all clear, post office, everybody, I'm assured it's a totally good thing to do, and the signs will go up for you at the corner of New York and Broad,
Yeah.
New York and Elwood, and maybe, if no one notices, 31 in New York. It's not in the borough though, so we have to be sneaky and do it at night.
Put it on the borough line.
Or on the borough level, yeah. So if we could have a motion to introduce that resolution.
So moved.
No.
Is there a second?
Or signs.
Sally?
Okay. Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Ms. Giles McCormick? Mr. Gorman?
I think I have to abstain.
Mr.
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon? Okay.
So, we'll bring the sign that you can hang up at home on Saturday to the reception for you. That brings us to our council members' report. I believe that Mr. Runyon goes first this evening.
Environmental Commission is continuing their work on Sustainable Jersey application. That is due November 17th. Planning Board approved the Flemington Outdoor LLC application, which was the wall on the circle. And the Planning Board Appeals Ordinance is at its second reading tonight. And that's all I have.
Councilwoman Peterson.
Okay, I would just like to reiterate what Mayor Driver said about the streetscape project. There will be no more parking or traffic ramifications from this. Now they're just going to make it look really beautiful. So thank you, Robert, for keeping us all informed every day about what's going on.
Thank you.
That was very well done. Yes, that's it.
Okay. Councilwoman Giles McCormick.
I went to Flemington DIY's board meeting this last week. They have events planned well into 2020, mostly around their jazz series that is continuing. It's just a really lively, wonderful art space to have as part of our community. So if you haven't gone, I suggest going to check them out. The Samuel Fleming House is all hands on deck right now for their turkey tray, which is December 7th, which is a Saturday at 5 p.m. at the Elks Lodge on 31. In addition to wanting people to attend, it is $20 to attend, and you do get a ticket list, a free packet of tickets included with your ticket. Excuse me. They also are looking for donations for items to bid on. If you have a restaurant, any services, gift cards, experiences, anything like that, if you're a business in the area, I strongly encourage you to donate, and you may be hearing from me. And I can connect you with the right people in terms of making that happen. The HPC did unfortunately have the presentation of the suggested revised historic map pushed from the last planning board meeting. It will happen on November 4th. I encourage anyone that is interested in the expansion changes in the suggestions for a historic map to attend. It will be, I'm not sure.
I think it's supposed to be here.
Yes, I believe
Yeah,
it's
I
going
think-
to be here at 7 o'clock on November 4th. So, the Halloween, I'm just gonna add that the, for the FCP, we'll talk a little bit about FCP, is that the Halloween parade is this Thursday, at 5 o'clock. There've been a lot of calls asking about rain forecast, things like that. If there are gonna be any changes, it will be announced in the next
By 10
12
o'clock
hours.
tomorrow.
So we've never canceled Halloween.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
got the tents.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
Rain or shine.
Yeah.
Yes, so there's been a lot of, just sharing that the FCP's been getting a lot of questions about it, and so that it is a rain or shine event. And
Well,
then it's
the tents are still up, aren't they?
Yes, I think.
No,
Well, they were just up like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago.
And is it gonna be a
Plan that.
parade, or is it gonna be at the filling
It's
station?
gonna be at the filling station,
Station.
and then they have an area mapped out.
So kids have trick or treated in the rain for many times for years in the borough. It's quite unfortunate, but Halloween is on the 31st. We did change it one time in the past after Superstorm Sandy. The wires on the ground kind of made that happen. So,
But that's it for my report right now.
Okay,
Councilman Gorman.
well, I really had nothing to say, now I do. I just want to thank you for the renaming, and I hope a lot of you can come out Saturday, and I'll have more to say, because it's gonna be more of that kind of a thing, I think, you know. But it's been an honor to be here, and at times have gotten quite different from when I started. There is no such thing as computers and stuff like that, and then things have gotten so much better that now it takes us twice as long to hold a meeting. So we're all so much better.
You have 2 more to go.
Yeah.
Remember, you have 2 more to go.
Yeah, okay, I'll be here. That's it, I pass.
Be very quick.
Councilman.
Expect an animal control report for our next meeting regarding environmental, where Councilman Runyon was speaking about the deadline for November. Our last environmental meeting, we did not have a quorum. However, planning for when we can gather that quorum, and there's certainly plenty of work out there. We would like to invite members of the community who would be interested in our environmental committee to let it be known. I was involved in review of borough bills, and I've been reminded by Councilman Gorman that that's the way it always had been, reviewing bills very closely. With regards to that, as noted by the mayor, we did have a review this evening regarding the Beacon study. I will say this, there was no surprise bar one, and that was that there was discussion of a very clear path forward for advancing development. Thank you.
Jeff.
Also relatively short, I was able to, in conjunction with the Red Cross smoke alarm, 2 events I was able to be at. The mayor already mentioned on Saturday the 19th when we had a whole bunch of volunteers from the Red Cross here, probably 25, 30 volunteers from the Red Cross. In addition, and I just want to thank our fire department, who drove folks around in the trucks, who helped as necessary, who really gave of their time, and I want to thank them all for that, to make everyone just a little bit safer, and the Red Cross for coming forward and us being able to do this project. I also, kind of as a kickoff for that, there were some young adults who are at the Red Cross Club at 100 Central High School, who ran through town the week before with little door hangers to let folks know that on Saturday, if someone knocks on your door and asks you for smoke, if you want to put a smoke detector in, it's legit, and but it also in there was if folks wanted to schedule an installation when they couldn't be there. And I did want to thank those kids. It's a club, they're volunteering, and it's always great to be able to talk to our teams who are taking time out to volunteer and doing those things. So that was a really good program that I hope we'll be able to do every year in October to be able to provide that to more residents. The only other area, two other areas I just want to mention is library board had the latest meeting a week and a half ago. Got an update from the architect on the interior renovations. As we suspected, we're going to be able to get through some of the bare minimums of what needs to get done in terms of bringing the interior space of the what we'll call the new part of the library, the paneling up to code, and dealing with the front entranceway, which are the two most critical items. And then there was discussion about how to prioritize the rest of the wish list. There is a potential for us to phase this in and seek a grant from the State Historic Trust, which has a specific program for libraries. That funding cycle is spring, so it wouldn't be this round of work, but we would do this bit of work in such a way to set up those next projects if additional funds were to become available. We're hoping that the bid documents would be able to go out in such a time that we could, in kind of the first quarter of 2020, to do this work at a time when it wouldn't conflict with other projects at the library. We don't want to obviously get in the middle of the summer programming and some of the other stuff. So we're also hoping that the folks who do this kind of work, winter is a slow time for them, and we can get some good prices by having that work done in the first quarter. So those are that items. And the other thing is about our two contracts with the labor contracts. We had a discussion in the executive session at the end of last council meeting where drafts were circulated to members of council. I asked for folks to get back to me and the rest of the labor committee, Mr. Gorman and Mayor Driver, if there were any concerns or comments, and hearing none, from no issues from anybody, we're moving forward. And what you'll see on the agenda tonight are the resolutions to start the process for the adoption of those two collective bargaining agreements. The hearing for both of those, both with the PBA for the police as well as the Teamsters for DPW, water, sewer, will be held at the November 18th meeting, and that's my report.
Okay. Brings us to our first public comment session after 3 minutes. Ms. Brown.
Joanne Braun, 77 Jefferson Court, Flemington. I have a question for Mayor Driver. Can you please explain how you, with Caitlin and Jeff on your side, explain to me how you forced Jack Cust to make sure to save 78 Main and bring the project in line with what you think the community wants? How did you force him?
So we told him that it would probably be in his best interest to do that because they need to settle with you and you need to settle with them, and that would be a big step towards making that happen.
But we're not settling.
But aren't we settling with you?
Yes,
Not him.
we don't settle.
Yeah, well, we unfortunately can't settle in a vacuum. It's kind of a three-part settlement, three parties to this. And they are parties to the lawsuit. They have petitioned.
I understand that.
They have petitioned the courts to
I understand
become a
that.
party. So yeah, it's now settling with everybody.
I understand that, but we still haven't had a response from our two settlement letters. And also, I want to point out, in one of your, I guess, political mailings or letters to the editor, that the Friends of Historic Flemington do not oppose redevelopment. We want redevelopment. So please stop using words out of context to portray a false narrative purposely aimed to divide a town for political gain or Facebook likes. That's all. We want redevelopment. We want to work. We want to make something happen too. So, that's my comment.
Are you okay? Outside of the 3 minutes, did you break your collarbone or?
No, I broke my elbow.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Thanks.
Mr. Previtt.
Tony Previtt, 45 North Main
You
Street.
want to wait till Sally gets back?
Oh, hang on. Sorry, I didn't realize Sally stepped away. She needs to take minutes.
Yeah, take.
I didn't know it was Steve. That's sharp eyes.
Sharp eye, I didn't even notice she disappeared. Hey, Sally?
I'm sorry, I was just trying to clarify.
Yeah, if we don't get the resolution tonight, it's okay, we
No,
can.
no. This was about the Teamsters contract and the PPA
Okay,
contract.
so we can talk about that when we get.
When we get to that point of the
Okay,
agenda.
okay, sorry, I just wanted to.
Sorry, Mr. Previtt, your 3 minutes.
Tony Previtt, 45 North Main Street. When will we just declare that this imbroglio between the Friends, the Borough, the Jack House, can we just declare an impasse and get this before, the judge, whoever's gonna make the final determination? Because all we're doing, I guess, is running up, fees, our time, and a lot of people in this area are very frustrated and confused about how this paralysis has set in. With a willing developer, with intelligent people, with the downtown that's dying, with no foot traffic, where we have to import, people. You're here, everybody's here. Can we just say, it's not gonna happen between the parties? Declare an official impasse and get it before a judge. Can we do that? Mayor, council? I'm not asking the other parties. I'm asking the governing body that basically is like, it's just being dragged on. And remember what I said. If there were 40 kids in a flooded cave and we had to get them out, you could forget it. And I'm sick and tired of repeating myself. This is a joke. If you're listening to people in and around this area, it's a joke. Okay? It's a joke, Mayor, Council, it is. And if you realize that, let's just declare an impasse and get it over with. I need some feedback on that.
The wheels of justice move at the speed the wheels of justice want to move.
Well, there's a letter going back and forth. They're, mincing words every.
That's all in parallel though, and I think as you've asked before, we've also stated before that it is, a judge is proceeding, those steps are happening.
And at the way this is going on, just, laboriously. Little time frame here. Will it be a Happy New Year for Flemington? Or will it
Those
just
things are
be,
dictated by the courts.
or will it just be the curse continue?
Not unless the Friends decide to settle and offer a reasonable settlement.
Well, if they don't, when will the judge decide? When will it just get to the point where it's over? We're
Don't
talking
know, we don't know. I mean, the wheels of justice move at the speed the wheels of justice will move.
And point of clarification also, this council, as we know back in March, had the resolution to proceed to determine what the costs would be for the associated project. We've heard what the benefits would be. Those benefits, well, it doesn't really mean much until you know what the costs are. So, November 18th, we will be able to follow a roadmap in terms of advancing this project.
Ms. Gorman.
Thank you. Elaine Gorman, 34 New York Avenue. Caitlin mentioned something about HPC, but I'd like to flesh that out a little bit. HPC frequently supports and provides educational kinds of events for the community as we are charged to do by ordinance. We actually had 2 of those this month. We had to rearrange one. The first was October 10th, and it was held at the main branch of the county library. And Colonel Thomas Lowry and his lovely wife Esther Fleming Lowry did a marvelous presentation. They, of course, are very important colonial figures to Flemington. They were absolutely delightful. We can thank Susan Peterson for supplying incredible refreshments and a lovely talk about historic cooking and the use of spices, etc. We had over 100 people register for that program, which was probably one of the best attended. Then on October 19th, we did a talk and walk, which was here at Borough Hall, along with the Red Cross. And we had about 40 people attend that, a lovely talk by Janice Armstrong about traveling houses in Flemington. Many people are unaware that the houses and some of the other buildings in the borough were not always where they are today. And it was a fascinating lecture. It was followed then by about an hour walking tour for perhaps half of the attendees, and we went to visit some of these moved buildings where they are residing today. It really was a fascinating tour, and I think well attended, both of those. So I just want to kind of brief you about where HPC has been lately and a lot of the work that we've been doing. A quick question: as I drove down Main Street today, I noticed that our visitors kiosk was closed. Could you give us some information about what is that to do with the streetscape, and will it be reopening soon?
Yes.
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 Good
It'll
to
be
hear.
moved back to where it was.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
As soon as they started installing the rest of the furniture, we still have the tools to do it. Mr. Shore.
Robert Shore, 47 Broad Street. First, I want to say congratulations to John Gorman. Thank you for your service. I haven't always agreed with you, but I do respect the fact that you are a committed public servant. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to acknowledge Robin for her excellent communications regarding the streetscape. Every day, I made a point to read those, and I think she's done an excellent job at it. And also, I just had a chance to peruse the strategic plan, and I think it's a good start. And thanks for that effort. I'm excited that the living wall on Main Street, on the Circle, has been approved. I think this is wonderful. I would encourage the town to develop some design guidelines for other projects around the town, so that it doesn't get out of hand. This thing was done, although I think it was done pretty nicely, it was done with without any guidelines being set, and it was, anything could come before us. And I think we could narrow the scope of design with some guidelines, so that when future projects come, which I hope they will, those developers can be so guided. And lastly, acknowledging the Samuel Fleming House did a great job with their pumpkin painting, and my daughters frequent that all the time. I like to take them over there. They did a good job. I would like to see a copy of the HBC map, the final one before it gets introduced in the ordinance. I wasn't here last time. I know it was on the agenda, but it didn't happen.
It is available on their website.
Okay, good. It's time. This is the time of year where I would put out RFPs for your, borough attorney, for your borough engineer, for planning board professionals. It's time, because I think we still haven't perfected that area here. As far as the collective bargaining goes, I would, I hate collective bargaining. I hate unions, period. And I think it might be of interest to poll the workers to see if they really feel they need that representation from the union. I'm sure the police do, but the DPW and the water departments, I might think they might not, because we take pretty good care of them. And lastly, the shared services project that we're on. I'd like to get an update as to where we are with that. You know, are we looking at doing something with the DPW, with the police station, with the courts, the police, whatever? So I'd like to know what's going on with that and maybe give us an update.
I'll speak very briefly to that. As I noted at the last council meeting, it's my second contact with Chief Rotella. At that contact, he told me that the last of the data from county communications was available. However, the file size was such that he was unable to have it emailed to him. So this was the Friday prior to the last meeting. I'm waiting for contact when we will actually have that data. I understand that all other data that was necessary to come from the police department was done. And of course, the other departments have already finished. So we're waiting on that information to come from county communications. As I noted, in terms of pulling out of the data the piece that the state needs, I offered my assistance with that, and that's where we are right now. The DCA will be able to respond very quickly to this. Again, my thanks for everyone involved, but we are waiting right now for that data to be picked up and relayed by the chief. Thank you.
Any other comments? Anyone who hasn't spoken? Mr. Bebout?
Tim Bebout, 194 Main Street, Flemington. I just would like to encourage the council when looking, thinking about the budget and improving it for the FCP. You know, the strategic plan that was put in place, those line items, although every single detail in the line item, which is a high-level line item, may not spell out exactly what they're going to do. The strategic plan is directed at that, and we're always open and we always consult our stakeholders in many different ways in different sessions to form the best strategic plan and to use the dollars that we have. So I just ask that the council considers that, you know, in improving that budget, that all of the efforts and all of the use of that money is going to go towards achieving that strategic plan. We continue to adapt the plan, as Robin had talked about. We have some big items on there and some big dreams that will encourage and hopefully draw in more donations to support that and to subsidize that. But this is what we have to work with, and we hope that the council looks at the strategic plan while you're considering improving the budget. So thank you for that.
Anyone else who hasn't spoken? Lois?
Lois Stewart, Flemington Borough. I'm wondering what the status is of the Heinlein property.
Still listed for sale.
And what is the status on the police station?
In what way? It's still scheduled to close later this month. We are working with the developer to get an extension as to on that closing date.
And what are your intentions for a permanent solution?
Still exploring that.
Okay, I'd like to ask, what are your criteria, Mayor Driver, for your appointments to the planning board?
I determine what their special skills are and what I think they can offer.
And if they're a Democrat?
No, I don't ask people what how they vote.
I wanted to comment, I disagree with Mr. Shore. The living wall is a big disappointment. It puts all the people in this community at a higher risk for injury. And I just think it was totally inappropriate, and I am very sad about that. And I certainly don't want to see any kind of movement to encourage additional signs of that nature. They are just not appropriate for this community. And I also wanted to comment on your letter, Mayor Driver, that was sent to tap into. I just think that there are a lot of things in there that are not really right on target. And when you call us so-called friends, I mean, I take exception to that. I am a friend of this community. I want redevelopment. And when you said if the friends would settle, we're ready to settle when that developer gets his plans in a condition that's for the benefit of this borough. And when you say he lowered the height on the corner of Spring Street down to 4, which is still not acceptable. But right in the next little thing, it's still 6. And going up Chorister, it's still 6. That's not a reduction in height. It's game playing, and you're supporting it, and I'm disappointed. Thank you.
Anyone who hasn't spoken? Moving on to the, what? Oh, Tim's already spoken
I
now,
know,
and
yeah.
we have a second public comment session.
Okay.
Coming up next is the approval of the minutes. If we could have a motion to approve the October 15th regular council meeting minutes.
So moved.
Mr. Donishton?
Yes.
Ms. Giles McCormick? Yes. Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
A motion to approve the October 15th, 2019 executive session minutes.
Move those.
Second.
Mr. Donishton?
Yes.
Mr. Giles McCormick? Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Brings us to the consent agenda. If we could have a motion to approve resolution.
Yes, some of, I would.
To approve
I
the
have to
consent
finish
agenda?
reading it. So people know what we're doing.
Complete my sentence, but go ahead.
2019-206, transportation electrification, having to do with transportation electrification. And 2016, an off-premise draw raffle for the Flemington Fire Department.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Donishton?
Yes.
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
All right.
This brings us up to our regular agenda. First item is the ordinance 2019-21. This is a second reading, so it is a public hearing. This is amending chapter 14 of the Planning Board and Historic Preservation Commission, revised general ordinances of the Borough of Flemington, section 1415, appeals from planning board decisions to the governing body. If we could have a motion to open that public hearing.
So moved.
Mr. Donishton?
Yes.
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing is now open.
Are there any comments? Mr. Short.
Robert Short, 47 Broad Street. You know, I've been thinking about this, and for the life of me, I can't understand why we want to do this. And I was wondering if somebody would kind of break it down for me. It might be very simple to explain, but it doesn't seem like it's logical. So I want to know, I want to understand why we're doing this.
Well, I don't want to use up your time.
It's a
No,
public
it's okay.
hearing.
I got a lot of time this time.
Yeah,
I guess I have time too.
But you have time during the council
All right,
comments.
so then I'll just wait.
But you should respond to him.
Yeah.
You can respond to him, but rather than going on, because we'll discuss it as council too, after we close the public hearing,
Okay.
the way we always do. But I think Mr. Shore is entitled to a response to his question.
Well, sure, and as someone who sits on the planning board and council, I think I'm kind of in an awkward position. My thoughts on it are that I've heard people say that, you know, this is a power grab by council. You know, what is, you know, is this good for council? Is this bad for planning board, vice versa? Personally, I think those aren't the questions I ask. The question I ask is this best for the community? And, you know, part of what I factor into this is that, you know, we have to understand the community that we represent. We represent the lowest median income community in this county. And if we're concerned about access and fairness and equitability, I think that we have to take that into consideration. So, you know, there are people, this is a working class community, I think. We've got teachers, we've got construction workers, we've got nurses, And not everyone can afford, if they disagree with a planning board decision, or a particular D variance, to take this to the court system. And that's what I've seen happen, because money gives you voice, gives you power. And, you know, there are many in this community who don't have money, don't have that voice, and don't have that power. And what this ordinance does is essentially levels the playing field so that anyone in this community, regardless of money, has a voice and can appeal directly to their elected representatives and ask them, is this best for this community? You know, appeal to them, how does it affect me? And ask their elected representatives to represent them and have an avenue to avoid the court system and have representation. And you know, I'm a progressive. I don't hide that. I support Medicare for all at the national level. Locally, I support fairness for all, and I think this is a step in that direction.
Wow. So I'm not a progressive, but I will say that you know, that was very succinct what you said, and I think I didn't know which way to go here, but you know, we have Miranda rights in this country for very similar reasons. And you know, if you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. And I get that, you know, the median income in Flemington is very low, and I get, you know, those people do have a voice here, and they should. So, thank you. I appreciate what you said. Who else is on there? Is Jeff, are you still on the planning board?
No, I just was on it for 11 years, and Chris has been on it for a year, and I can tell you that I don't like this at all.
Why don't you like it? Why don't you like it?
Because planning board members are appointed for a longer period of time than members of this governing body, and are not usually caught up in the electoral nonsense that sometimes happens. And I feel, having served on the planning board and as a professional planner as well, that there's a certain amount of technical expertise, even from just members of the public who've served on planning boards, hearing the testimony, being in those rooms, hearing the ins and the outs, that you can't, that the members of a governing body don't necessarily need, don't have that expertise to hear those things. I'm not talking about the professionals, I'm talking about the folks who are serving on the planning board, who have asked questions and heard it. And the way this ordinance is written, it means that the adjudication is on the existing record, which doesn't capture what happens at planning board meetings, it doesn't allow for members of the governing body to have that same intimate knowledge of what goes on in an application over a period of time. And I just don't think that it's the right mechanism. The state statute has laid out that, if there's an approval on and again, this is on a D variance, this is on use variance, this is on kind of the big stuff. That there is a mechanism, there is an avenue for appeal, and my concern is that private property owners who spend a lot of time preparing, and for those who've never been through a D variance before, it's a tremendous amount of work on behalf of the applicant. The developer has to hire a lot of professionals, there's a lot of testimony that has to be given, it has to meet a certain standard to meet the state law, and if we want to be a place that's open for development, if we want a place that encourages folks with their private property to make an investment in our town, we are now putting yet another potential barrier in front of folks to make those investments. The planning process is part of the whole reason why a lot of that happens is at the state level is at the local level is because the state municipal land use law calls for criteria to met testimony to be given, and I don't know, I just don't like undermining all of that expertise, and really there's no threshold here other than one person who doesn't necessarily like something to trigger a whole nother round of review, putting a potential project at risk, a project that's been vetted, a project that's been heard, and someone has spent money on getting it up there. Look, maybe the gorilla in the room is Courthouse Square, but I could tell you that the D variances that have been granted in the last few years, most of them are individual property owners who wanted to do like a change in use. One of them that I was directly involved with was at 76 Park Avenue. It was Carl Ackermeyer's property, and he wanted to change it back to allowing for residential use. And he had to spend money on an application. And if someone on that block just didn't happen to like him, or his wife for some reason, they could trigger a whole other review of the planning board decision using this ordinance. And I feel that's unfair to property owners. And it takes away what I think in New Jersey is a good process of having planning board be at least a little bit away from the political fray, and thinking about long-term 20-year horizons, what's in the collective interest for the community, as opposed to someone that happens to be running for election that year kind of stuff that oftentimes happens. So that's my long answer to why I don't like this.
But you know, it was succinct too, and it's very valuable, and I can appreciate what you're saying. You know, if a developer is spending loads of money to come in and get approvals, and to have someone that's not, vested, to just come in and just appeal it because, like you said, they don't like you or the wife or whatever, that's not really...
It's a concern.
It is a concern.
And now, the avenue appeal is still there. People can still file a brief in the court. But again, if we want to argue that there should be some sort of pro bono public mechanism to provide for legal aid for someone who wanted to file one of those appeals, I think it's a great idea. That's not what this does, though. So.
I got it. Okay. Well, thank you. I just wanted to have a better understanding as to why this has become an issue, why it's up, the pros and cons of it. Thank you.
Ms. Gorman.
Yes, Elaine Gorman, 34 New York Avenue. Let me first thank Jeff for his time and service on planning board, and Chris as well. And as HPC chair, I have attended many planning board meetings. And I've labored over this and read this myself several times. First of all, appreciating your time and your service, Jeff, but I think there is a certain amount of naivete if you really feel that there is no political anything going on in any board, committee, commission, group. I feel that I have seen that in action in many places, including planning board. I know that we are really looking, I think, with this to give access, fairness of that kind of access to all applicants. I think that when you discuss expertise on the planning board, it is my understanding that that's about a 5-hour workshop, perhaps, a seminar class. And I would question what type of expertise anyone who is appointed to planning board, any community member, would give them any particular expertise. I would think that a lot of it is truly on-the-job training and the experience of working with applicants and developers and professionals. So I think the argument that the planning board has better or more expertise than the council is a weak one. You certainly bring a lot of expertise yourself to this council, and I'm sure that there are other people as well who would bring similar quality, perhaps even beyond what some of our planning board members have. So just in trying to respond to a couple of the points that you made, this is what I see when I attend our planning board meetings. Thank you.
Ms. Stewart.
Lois Stewart, Flemington Borough. I just want to say amen, Elaine, amen, because I go to...
And we didn't plan this.
No, I had no idea what she was going to say, or if she was going to say anything. But the thing is, I go to practically, many planning board meetings, and I couldn't agree more that it is so obvious that there's political influence in the decision-making of that board. And I certainly agree with what Chris said, that people who cannot afford to seek their own legal assistance should not have to go to a public defender, whatever you call them when you get free legal. It's kind of a, you know, you have to have a strong constitution to admit that, hey, I don't like this, but I can't afford to fight it, so I have to go here. So people won't do that. But if they can go to their governing body, it's a totally different thing. And when you stop and think, the members of these boards are appointed people. They are not responsible to the constituency. The members of the governing body are elected, and so they do have a responsibility to the constituency. And if they don't act in the constituency's best interest, and I liked what Chris said, to do what's best for the community, if the affecting who is on the various boards in the community, they're all appointed. So I think this is a good thing. I do not think that people that just don't like something down the street are just gonna come and you know, petition the council to change it. But I think it gives the constituency another opportunity to seek out and perhaps get something changed that would make the community better. And I do encourage people to come to the planning board meetings, because it's quite an eye-opener when you see how those meetings are run. It is not very appropriate in my mind. So I'm asking that this ordinance, giving the constituency of this community an opportunity to further discuss and seek perhaps a better decision on major things. Use variances are major things. They're not, you know, should the side yard be 15 feet or 20 feet. Use variances are major, major things. So I would encourage this governing body to give their constituency another avenue to seek redress from things that are inappropriate.
Okay.
Robin Lapidus, Flemington Community Partnership. I've worked with planning boards and councils for over 20 years, not here, so this is refreshing for me. But, you know, I think that if a community feels that there's access problems, you know, to council or to appointed members, that you know, having backup plans to redress or readdress things may not really get what you want in the long run, because I think that those access problems get solved in charrettes, and they get, you know, if you want to be inclusive, I think you have to do that work way, way in advance of anything coming to the planning board. And, you know, very few citizens have the time to spend attending every single meeting. You know, that's the really unfortunate aspect about politics. So I think the community has to create opportunities for citizens to be engaged, you know, when somebody's presenting plans and when master plans are being done. But I've seen a lot of D variances. I've seen a lot of really important changes in use, because things change over time, you know? There's so many uses that are not appropriate anymore, you know, because
you have to
things
address
change.
that.
I'm sorry, things change. So I think, I don't know that this uncomplicates the process. To me, it just prolongs an already complicated process where not everybody would agree with an appointee or what gets decided. But I think, having been a part of the process, it's just like trials.
you know, when you're sitting in a trial, you might have really different perspective if you put in the time to witness the entire thing than if you read about it, you know, in a brief. So I hope that the FCP and as a group, we can try to address some of your concerns, because I think we all share them, but I don't know that this is the right mechanism to address it. Thank you.
Mr. Previtt.
I believe that this is like a noble ordinance, you know, it's noble in its effort to try to stem the inequities of, you know, politics, money, influence. And you're never going to isolate politics. It's part of the human element. Probably, you know, it has its basic forms, but if you're going to be here, if you're going to be at a planning board meeting, unless you're from another planet just dropped in, it's there. You have to recognize it. And we're going through the throes right now, you know, that building across the street on Main Street. But again, you'll never isolate politics. Like I say, it's part of the human chemistry. So I wouldn't waste my time on this. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna do anything in the end. I mean, you're all elected, that's politics. Just because you're elected, you don't mean your nobility and you're sacrosanct and you're gonna always do the right thing for the citizen. There's too many elements. You know, it's just too many elements. And I think we can all admit that if we're frank and honest. So that's it.
Mr. Shore?
So I'm trying to understand the process. So if this ordinance was to pass, somebody would come here and just basically stand up and say, I oppose this thing, I appeal this approval?
There's a filing procedure.
Okay.
And this ordinance is, we just didn't draft this, it just wasn't created by the council. This is in the statute, and this appeal process has to be triggered by an ordinance. In other words, the governing body has to say, we want to make this appeal process that's provided for in statute. And our ordinance that we're proposing tonight is almost verbatim out of the statute. That we want to offer this to residents. You don't have to, you can do that, it's an option, but it's in the statute. And the procedures, everything in the ordinance as to what has to be done, the filing of a petition, the ordering of transcripts, there's a whole process that's set forth to bring an approval of the planning board before this governing body.
And only approvals.
Correct.
Right, so would that require an attorney, or in most cases have an attorney to do that for you?
It's hard to say. Some people may choose to do it themselves, some may hire an attorney. It's not a simple process of just saying I oppose it.
And then the council would vote as to whether they want to approve or deny that approval?
The council has to consider the record below that was made in the planning board. The council doesn't get the benefit, and I think this is what Councilman Doshna was referring to. The council doesn't get the benefit of the live presentations and the testimony that was before the planning board. The council gets the written record below, and from that record, the council has to make a decision to approve, deny, modify that approval. And they have to do so under the same scrutiny of making a decision that's not arbitrary or capricious, or there's certain guidelines the council has to review it within. It just can't be an arbitrary, I don't like it.
I just feel the process is arduous enough, and to have to do this again in front of the council is very
And
very challenging.
if someone's dissatisfied with the council's decision, then there's a resort to court. So there's another layer.
There won't be any politics in that.
But there's already a way right now.
Correct.
So if you can file an appeal within 45 days.
Correct.
From the time it's approved.
When it's memorialized, so there's if planning board grants final approval, and then there's a resolution that's adopted, and then there's that window, then someone can then file a suit. But yeah, there's a There's a couple of clocks that kick in there, that's under this existing law.
Yeah, so I don't see why we need another mechanism for this. And you know, it's, the biggest concern I have about this, it actually can work against what we're trying to do in Flemington, which is encourage more development here.
Which is true.
Which we need. Like I said, you heard me say it before to Robin, you know, we need redevelopment and we need it now. We need plan agreements, we need it now. If we have somebody coming in opposing everything that gets approved, that's a huge issue. Because this town is, you know, got 11 nails in a 12-nail coffin.
It's a death spiral.
Any other comments? Ms. Stewart?
Lois Stewart, Flemington Borough. We are not in a death spiral.
Okay,
I think bad-mouthing our community is just terrible. And if you were trying to get out of Maple Avenue, as I was today, about 3:30, and you had to wait and wait and wait, I don't know where all those cars were going and do what they're doing in this dead community. So we are not a dead community. And yes, we all want, everybody that lives in this community wants the community to go forward. We want redevelopment. But by God, we want right redevelopment. We don't want a few people that are trying to make money ramming stuff down our throats. And that's exactly what's happening in many instances. And I'm sick of it.
Is there any other comments?
I'd like to respond in case it generates more discussion. I appreciate this because once we close this, then we can't hear from, we can't hear, well, we
Yeah,
can
but it's
speak,
still a
but we
public
can't hear from the public. So I'm gonna offer this, the concern for this becoming political. I'm gonna approach it from a different point of view. I'm actually gonna agree with people that think, you know, why is he agreeing with me and yet he's supporting this? I mean, folks need to understand that the reason we're facing this ordinance is because of past irresponsible behavior. To say that this ordinance would bring about political action is to ignore past political action. Was a year ago really that long ago? Now, I love the idea of charrettes. I went to the newly elected officials meeting together with Betsy Driver when we were both elected to council. And the idea of charrettes and including the community, I think is a terrific idea. And I would say that had that occurred with other redevelopment in this community, we might be far further along with that redevelopment. Had we listened to the community in terms of the need to not just hear the benefits of the project, but also hear the cost. So we could then speak to net benefit and plan, would be far further along. So I see this as a safeguard. I see this as a warning against those who would politicize to know that there are other mechanisms that can place a check. And I really am disappointed not to see more members of the planning board here. If one were to attend the planning board meetings and the bravado of certain members in terms of how terrible this was, and the sky would fall, and it's unimaginable. I took notes, and I'm going to say them now because any members of the community that would like to comment, please tell me that I'm wrong. Regarding the special training, and only planning board members can have this. Beth McManus described this as people go somewhere for half a day. When things come before this council, and I don't present myself as an expert, but I do listen to people that I agree with and people that I may not agree with, things I may not understand. I want to listen to them. And to assume that something can be brought to the council because we didn't go away for half a day, we're not qualified to look into this. Really, I feel at a tremendous disadvantage right now by not being able to respond to the statements of planning board members at the time. First off, this ordinance, there was a narrative that this is rare. This is so rare. In fact, we have no idea who else uses it. It's permissible by municipal land use law, but who uses it? And I commend the strength and resolve of Councilman Runny. He just sat there very quietly and goes, well, do we know any other communities that have this? Folks looked around the room, I had no idea. It's a shame you weren't at the planning board meeting. Because he said, well, didn't this language, doesn't Raritan Township also have this? We didn't have to go very far. Regarding the ordinance, it gives the opportunity to seek review without costly legal expense. All right. It was suggested by our mayor at that time that residents seek legal aid if they can't afford bringing suits themselves. We have our own problem with legal bills. Susan Engelhardt was concerned for politicization and apparent power grab. Todd Cook cited 20 years on the planning board experience and procedure against politicization. As I said, was a year ago really so long ago? Mark Haynes said, I support the committee chairperson. And that was fine. And then he added, he doesn't think it's right to pass on the cost to the taxpayers. And this was never really explained, and was offered by the same Mark Haynes who in 2017 approved the Main Street RDA with its undisclosed potential 30-year hit on the borough taxpayers, who, as police commissioner, approved the 23% raise in additional benefit costs with reduction to police contracts in terms of their benefits. That was in 2017. And in 2018, cut the deal to sell our police headquarters, which I would later learn from the police. There had been no communication with them about what it would take to replace that. And now we're looking at minimum $3+ million. And it's a major roadblock for the project across the street. So that same person's talking about placing expenses onto residents. I was really looking forward to hearing these people come and qualify their statements. And I apologize for stating these thoughts while they were here, while they're not here, but these are the things that they said at planning board. And instead we get a letter. And this letter from the chairperson says, I respectfully recommend that council leave the responsibility of granting your variances to the members of the planning board. Do so keeps making D-variances politically independent. Again, I have to say it was a year ago, that long ago. And protects the borough from litigation. And I think I'm the perfect person to talk about that. Always this threat of litigation, litigation, litigation. Litigation gets settled. Litigation is a threat. We are paralyzed in making a wrong decision for fear of litigation. Thank you.
Mr. Shore.
So, you know, your comments, Councilman Harris, remind me, just give me a break here for a second. I went to Xavier's 50th year anniversary, high school reunion. And the keynote speaker was Nino Scalia, who was the Supreme Court Justice. And he talked about the reason we create laws. And the analogy he made was, you know, if people are walking down the street throwing gum on the sidewalk, and somebody steps on the gum, and if too many people step on it and start complaining to the local municipal governing body, there's going to be a law. And the reason I say this is because what has transpired in the last year with Courthouse Square is really the genesis of this. And I get that the planning board wants to kick and scream, but this is the effect of what they did. I understand that, okay? And these are just desserts in my opinion, because what they did and how they did it was wrong. Simply stated, it was wrong. And while I may not agree with this, I can fully understand why you're doing it. And maybe this needs to be a message. You guys have this difficult decision, I don't.
I would say message
So,
is
yeah, Courthouse,
consequences.
I'm sorry, Courthouse Square was not a D variance, so it would not have had any impact.
Well, you're right, it wasn't a D variance. It's an area needed redevelopment and all that, but...
No, but that's an important, but I think it's an important distinction because once the council approved the redevelopment plan, which five out of 6 of us weren't here for, the planning board had to judge what was submitted against a plan that was approved 3 years before. And yeah, there was a political decision to kick those folks off and put other folks on the governing body. So yeah, but the letter from Mr. Cook mentions the only D variances in the last few years, and I think it's worth noting were 30 Church Street, 70 Church Street, which is commonly known as a spice factory, the Islamic Center at Victorian Square, Lackamakka, which I mentioned before, at 76 Park, and Kensho Land, which I don't remember the address where that is. But there were these 5, what's that?
Church Street and Brown.
Yes, Church and Brown, right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was it. Those are the only ones that would be subject to this kind of review question. Courthouse Square is, and for that matter, anything subject to redevelopment, area need redevelopment, a redevelopment plan, none of those are covered by this proposed ordinance.
Right, nor is this intended to be a tool to, in any way, do that. In fact, I don't even believe that this would necessarily be applicable for those who may take issue with the circle sign. Rather, these concerns bring this to light. And I want to make sure that no one is trying to twist what I said in terms of that Courthouse Square is not a D variance. I understand that. Courthouse Square is being used as a very clear example of political action that did not take into consideration the charterette and the planning and putting all these pieces together in the beginning. Early on, when we were talking about Courthouse Square, we kept looking over at Somerville. And what did they do in Somerville? RDA and pilot came out. Final plans came out. People looked at this and said, right, we may not all agree, but we can get behind this. And that's the legacy we've inherited, and that's what we're still dealing with right now.
Lois, keep in mind, please, that this is the public hearing and we can discuss it as council members when the public hearing is closed.
We've got your hand.
I said, keep in mind that this is the public hearing and we can discuss this as council members when the public hearing is closed, after we make a motion to introduce it.
Yes, but I just would like to make a couple additional comments. First of all, I was one time on the Board of Adjustment. We didn't go for a half-day training. We were given the municipal land law book and all this stuff, and you were expected to read it, and you were expected, if you were going to accept this responsibility, you were expected to get up to snuff. And I'm sure that the members of the governing body, if they were expected to rule on something of use variance change, being questioned, that they would do likewise. People who are responsible are not just gonna act off the top of their head. I don't know what the planning board is afraid of. If they make a responsible decision that is good for our community, and it is appealed, the governing body would uphold their decision. It is only if they make a decision that has some questionable aspects that somebody would bring to the governing body, and there might be some reason for changing that decision. So if they do their job, then it's gonna be fine. And the political aspects that I have seen in operation are really very disconcerting. And I think this gives people another avenue. And again, I say, please, let's have this opportunity. It's not something that nobody else has ever done. So,
Mr. Shore.
If, Mr. Whittlesey, if, let's say an individual or a company appeals this thing the current way, does the developer have to pay out of his escrow fees for the defense of the decision of the planning board?
Under the, you're saying if someone appeals under the proposed ordinance?
No, under the current ordinance. No, like, under the current land use ordinance. If I was to appeal a site plan approval with a D variance on it, and within the, after the resolution, I have my 45 days, and I appeal that, would the developer have to pay for the defense of the planning board or board of adjustments decision?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. If this ordinance passes and somebody appeals, would the developer have to pay for the defense of this governing body?
No.
No, but the borough would.
Borough would pay for it.
But the borough would?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no mechanism in this ordinance to charge the appellant anything other than the cost of producing transcripts at whatever the rate is for those kinds of things. But our time for professionals, our time for the borough attorney to review the issue, brief us so we understood what was going on, all of that, the time literally at the meeting when this was heard and our borough attorney is present, none of that's all bared by the taxpayers.
That's a material consideration here. It really is. Because if it was going to be on the applicant, I'd be totally opposed to this. The other comment I want to make is, I need you all to really look at the ethics motivating this. Okay? Why is this coming up? And really, is that a good enough reason to exact this kind of change on the process and procedure? I just put that out there for you.
Ms. Gorman.
Thank you. Elaine Gorman, 34 New York Avenue. There's always a comment or two or maybe more about transparency in government and the ability of the public to speak, to communicate with their elected representatives or even appointed representatives. And I would just like to share very quickly, part of this ordinance has within the title Historic Preservation Commission. And I read it many times, made my little notes in my red pen, and thought that I would have the opportunity to ask some questions regarding this. Well, it turns out that after attending many planning board meetings, I was not allowed to speak at all. At the last meeting, when I thought I would have that opportunity, I asked the vice chair if I could speak to this. I was told to wait because it was going to be on the agenda later on, which made sense. And I did say at the time, should I wait until the agenda item? I was speaking during public comment. Unfortunately, when the chair of the planning board arrived and took over the running of the meeting, and I asked 3 times if I could speak, I was told no. And therefore, I never spoke on this with my concerns that regarding HPC, and then beyond that, some of the things that we've been discussing this evening. I think it really is a detriment to our community when anyone is denied the opportunity to speak to a subject, particularly as I chair the HPC, we are named in this ordinance not to be permitted to speak or ask questions. I felt it was very disrespectful to a commission of this borough. Thank you.
I want to speak now.
Can we?
Yeah.
It is a public hearing. Are there any other comments?
Well, I have a comment about what Elaine just said. That I was at that meeting and I heard what went on, and I, in fact, agree with you. It was quite disrespectful. I have 4 words to say about this. Power to the people. And that's it.
Are there any other public comments?
I would like to encourage any council member that has a comment, if you feel that you have some great reason why you're going to do something for or against, like, if you address it now, then we have the opportunity to have a dialogue with those who've taken the time to be here. If we close the public comment and then we then speak amongst ourselves, we do not have the benefit of hearing from the public. My suggestion.
Any other public comments?
You know, I'm just thinking to myself, that's how it should work, Mr. Harris. And that goes to your power to the people, Mrs. Peterson.
Well, I can relate to some of the things that were said. Maybe that's the way of speaking now, a little earlier. But I didn't realize before when I first read this last week that it was just a D variance that we were talking about. And then I found out that from the meeting that basically what got me all upset is the wall, really. And I felt not enough was being done. And then I found out that Chris had stepped down, and I think the mayor stepped down. And I thought, oh, they must be gonna, because you'll have to come before the council later. That's why you stepped down. I don't know why did you step down for one thing and you didn't vote? I see you didn't vote because I thought you were gonna have this meeting later on. And that's become a big concern for me, that if you can't have a voice, but you're sitting up there, that's a couple of people that's told not to speak or vote. And that's what got me all concerned. And I'm really, you know, if there's an accident out there and someone's killed, I understand that they're not going to have the insurance policy. It's going to fall in this borough on our insurance policy.
Where's the state highway?
Yeah, but they won't. Yeah, but they're not having anything to do with it. They're saying they don't want to have voice anything.
So
DOT issued a permit.
But to clarify something.
Subject to our approval.
Well, some of the,
We don't have to approve the permit.
before, because we should not go too far down that
now you're
road
going
right
on
now.
another thing.
But no, to clarify what something that John said.
State municipal land use
State municipal
law.
land use law
Because they don't
says
want elected
that,
people.
well, no, it's not that. It's that if the existing law that's on the books right now, that's enforced right now, says that if a applicant is denied an approval, the applicant, the developer, or the property owner's mechanism of first appeal for anything that's in front of the Board of Adjustment is the governing body, which is why the Class 1 member, the mayor, and the Class 2 member, the council person, recuse themselves from any applications that are in front of the Board of Adjustment.
So what you're saying is they have a right to appeal, but we don't have a right to appeal them.
Exactly.
This would give us that right.
If the way that the state law is written is that if an applicant is denied denied approvals by the Board of Adjustment, their first body of appeal is the governing body and then the courts. That's why the mayor and the council person don't sit on Board of Adjustment matters. Now, let me be clear, you know, what triggers Board of Adjustment is D variances, is what triggers the Board of Adjustment, but if there is an application that is large, that happens to have a lot of moving parts to it, signs, setbacks, impervious coverage, environmental issues, historic preservation, and it also happens to have one little D variance in there, then that trumps everything else and the jurisdiction falls to the Board of Adjustment, and they're the ones who hear it. So, and again, I mean, just understand how the law works. It's not just because 76 Park Avenue wanted to allow for residential in an existing structure. If you take a large, complicated project that has lots of stuff going on, and it also happens to have a use variance in there, this is what triggers jurisdiction. So it's not just these simple applications of use variances. It could be fairly complicated, involved projects. Again, just a clarification. That's why the mayor and the council person don't sit on those.
Okay.
That's just state law.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. But like Lois, I was a Board of Adjustment member 36 years ago, and I was one of two that could actually read plans on that committee. And I thought that was pretty bad. And I don't know how much different it is today with what you got up there. The people, you know, they go to a few meetings. I don't know whether they've been trained on how to really.
The law changed. The law has required for the past.
Well, I know he joined
about 12.
No,
Not that. About a dozen years ago, the state of New Jersey said that if you're a planning board member or a Board of Adjustment member, it's no longer sufficient to be handed the big binder. You have to actually go get some training, because these things are important and they matter, and you have to go take the class. So, I mean, the state changed.
5 hours?
That's the 5-hour
That's
training.
fine.
That's the 5-hour training that everyone's got to do within 18 months of their appointment. I mean, so it's not a, so it was you know, when Ms. Stewart was saying, and what John was saying, that was the case 35 years ago, but they changed the law because they felt it was important that folks have that background to hear these cases. So that situation did change.
Do you take a test after the 5 hours?
You have to take a test.
So could I just get clarification on something?
We're still in the open public.
We're still in the public
Right.
hearing, we should really close the public hearing if we wanna have, Lois?
Well, I just wanted to thank John for bringing that up because that is just a very important part, that the applicant has a mechanism to appeal to the council, but the public does not. Something's the matter there. And that is exactly what the case is. The applicant already has the power to come to you if they are denied, but the public does not have the access to you.
Because in the United States, it's a presumption that owners of private property can get to do what they want to do on their private property. And if the state says no, the private property owner gets to come back to the governing body and say, hold on a second, your board told me I couldn't do what I want to do on private property, and I want to appeal that decision. That's what's driving that disparity. I mean,
But there still is a disparity which we can correct by having this as other communities do.
But this would open up the ability of one person to violate private property rights of somebody who wants to develop and goes through the process of a D variance.
Yeah, that disparity doesn't mean that.
I understand that full well.
And you know how to sue over a planning board decision, love.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. And you know it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to file that. You
Oh,
know that.
It doesn't?
Well, it depends if you want to pay lawyers and drag it out for years.
Well, let me tell you.
But
I think we
wrong
should
in
really
that.
close the public hearing.
yeah, I think
at
so
this
too.
point.
Alright, so can I move to close the public
Depends
hearing?
where you eat your money.
Yep.
It's not
Is
a
there a
political
second?
thing. It's
do
as
you wanna
Susan
wait for them
said,
to
power
come
to
back?
the people.
Okay, second.
You have two people missing.
No, we're not taking the vote
Well,
yet.
No, we're just closing the
Thank
public
you.
meeting. We're just closing the public hearing.
Okay.
So that we can continue the conversation once the council.
What are they afraid of? They do their job, they won't be challenged.
Okay, we
There's a
have
motion to
now.
close the public
Close
hearing,
the
and we're
public
waiting for
hearing.
y'all so we can vote on that.
Okay, yes.
So, no, I'm getting ready to take a vote. Oh, okay. Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Ms. Jasper-Gorman? Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Okay, so the public hearing is now closed. Now it's a chance for.
Yeah, so can we have a motion to adopt?
So we can talk.
Second.
Okay. Is there council discussion on this that has not already been stated?
So I have a question for Chris. You said that.
Excuse me, but we can't hear you, Caitlin.
Okay,
Speak
sure. I
too
have a
softly.
question for Chris. You said that Raritan Township has this activated. Is that
From what I
correct?
understand,
I believe they have a similar appeal process. It might not be verbatim, but they do.
because of the township versus the borough,
No, the wording in there is minute.
They have a separate board of adjustment from their
Yeah.
planning board, so the language is a little
But
different.
essentially, it's the same, they provided for the same.
We couldn't get enough volunteers.
So I think one of my concerns about this is actually speaking to minority rights, speaking to private property ownership when we talk about power to the people. And I generally agree with much of what, in terms of concerns about the imperfect nature of our boards and our commissions. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and that there's much room for improvement. But again, it's a matter of the methods to make those previous corrections. And I am very much concerned that this is not the correct way to make those needed corrections and those needed healings of our community. Specifically around looking at the list of the devariances that have been offered previously, and the likelihood of one in particular being brought forth before us because of specific concerns, specifically in our current political climate, that this will actually have the reverse intended consequences and make things worse and draw things out. And that especially when we're talking about private property, that general development and offering more services and businesses improves the lives of our residents and our taxpayers. And that putting additional barriers to those things is a major concern for me. So I don't. I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the information that has been shared. I don't know if this is the right. I feel like this will make things worse. Anyway.
I have some comments. So the letter that was sent by the planning board was adopted unanimously by the planning board, including all members that were up there that evening, including myself and including Councilman Runyon, as I recall. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I thought that was just a vote to send it to here, not the content of it.
Second thing, this is an unfunded situation that could get very expensive for the borough. So we have somebody who could file an appeal for the cost of obtaining transcripts. The experts, let's take the sign for instance. It was 3 meetings or 4?
4.
4. So there's a total of like 16 hours. So we now have 16 hours of transcripts that have to be reviewed, probably line by line by the governing body, with the guidance and assistance of experts and attorneys. That will get very, very expensive very quickly, but because one person may have an issue when they have another right to go ahead and appeal to the court. So let's say that they appeal, the governing body says, you know what, Jane Public, you're right. So now we have the developer who's going to appeal that case. And that's going to get even more expensive with more legal fees. At that point, I think it's just the record that they look at. I think it sends a very bad message that we're very unfriendly to development that fits, development that works. I'm concerned that one person can derail projects that might be very good for whatever reason, because they don't have to give a reason. So, Caitlin mentioned one of the projects on here was the Islamic Center. So, say we have somebody who does not think that there should be an Islamic Center in the borough for whatever reason they have, because they don't have to reveal that. So now we are in a situation of having to judge that. And I don't think it's fair to the governing body to do that when there is a planning board in place and when there is a mechanism for appeal. And I'm sorry that it costs money to file an appeal with the courts, but that is the nature of the beast. And I think that if we send a message that, anybody can appeal any decision of our planning board, we're not gonna see any development.
It's not any decision, it's just any decision.
No, but I think the
Well,
distinction.
peace, let's go with peace.
The distinction that like, when Lois was talking about how it levels the playing field, I think that the explanation that Jeff offered in terms of the fact that it's as a private property owner, the government is telling me there's something I cannot do on my property, that is a distinction that I think is really important. So I understand what you were saying and trying to me, that's not what it's doing, I guess. But I understand your interpretation at least. But I think that distinction is really important.
I also will point out that I believe the genesis of this was the sign and wall. It will not impact it. And Frank, maybe you can speak a little bit to that, because I know there were discussions recently regarding whether or not anybody could appeal that recent planning board decision with the variance. It's my understanding that this ordinance would not impact that recent.
There is a statute dealing with the time of application rule, as we call it, and that means that the developmental regulations in effect at the time that the application for the sign, for example, was filed, are the regulations that are available. This regulation is being filed after the fact, in my opinion, would not be available for that.
Okay. So then that opens up the whole big law of unintended consequences down the road. While as Tony put it, the intent may be noble, but the results might be quite less than those going forward. And it could cost this borough, I think, dearly, both in fees for experts, legal fees, fighting things. I just think that if somebody wants to appeal, they should go to the court and do it that way.
Go fund me.
I am encouraged by the efforts of the FCP and some of the grants that we have put in as a borough in order to try to do some of the things that I think this is trying to address. In talking about charrettes and talking about revising the master plan, things like that, I think will have real and meaningful impact on our community and are vital. And I think that they will speak to some of these things.
But to address
Sure. No, go.
But to address cost, I think it's difficult to predict whether something like this would save or cost, because if you take Courthouse Square, for example, not that this would have been applicable to it, but we didn't have this ordinance in place, and just in this past year, from the posts I've seen on Facebook, this has gone to courts and it's cost the borough $67,000 this year. Now, you know, if something like this were in place, and there was an appeal to the governing body, and the governing body, you know, sided one way or the other, it could just as well keep that application out of the courts. And yeah, there may be an upfront cost with it being in front of the governing body, but maybe down the road it would save money there.
Wouldn't it be likely that whatever the losing party would likely appeal? I mean, I don't want to we're going into a lot of hypotheticals, but I don't necessarily see that as I don't know.
I'm just saying that it's difficult to predict
Sure.
if it would cost or.
Yeah, and I just need to remind you, Caitlin, that charrettes and revisions of master plans don't necessarily hold the weight they should here. We've learned that. We've lived it. So, you know, it's a great idea, but it doesn't always yield fruitful conclusions.
True.
If it's not listened to.
Is that if there was testimony given at a public hearing that was in some way incomplete, there was an unasked question of a witness, if the testimony had some sort of gap, right, that might be that would have clarified, would have given us some information. This gives us no mechanism to recall experts, recall testimony, and ask those questions that might help us better adjudicate what.
You cannot expand the record.
The record can't be expanded, so we're only looking at those written transcripts. And, you know, take, for example, the sign on the circle that everyone's talking about. Planning board determined that a traffic study was not part of the record, right? Okay, now, agree or disagree with that decision, that's the record in which we are deciding this thing on. And if we felt, as the governing body, on an appeal of something along those lines, there should have, you know, we have to have a traffic study in order to really know what's going on. This doesn't get us there.
You don't have that.
We don't have that ability. This ordinance doesn't allow us to commission a study. It doesn't, and we can't deny, you know, we can't overturn the decision or non-decision of the planning board based on the hypothetical record that we wish they had gotten in the first place. Because that would be capricious. That
Or for unspecified reasons.
So my concern here is that and I didn't mention this before, but this is one of my other substantial concerns with the way this is written, is that it leaves that, what in my mind would be I'm not crazy about it under any circumstances, but if there was if we were talking about the ability for the governing body to compel testimony and order witnesses and put those costs on the person, you know, bring back your transportation person on your nickel, right? But we don't that doesn't do this. And so you know, we were to get an application where there was just incomplete testimony offered at first, we wouldn't have grounds to act in what might be the best way, because we have to act on the record that's given. And, you know, so that's another deficiency. I didn't have a chance to mention that before, but it's another concern of mine about the way that this thing is written. You know, those very important questions, we don't have there's no way to compel that information. It's only what's been, the record that's established. So that was another reason I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, can we have this rewritten then to put in these things that are bothering us?
The guidelines for this appeal process are set forth in the statute, and we cannot deviate from what we're statutorily permitted.
So we can't add that in now.
In other words, we can't say we're going to expand it to include other variances. We can't say we're going to expand it to include live testimony. We are bound, this right to appeal comes to us by the legislature. And it's set forth in the municipal land use law, and it's there for municipalities. If you want it, pass an ordinance, and it's in effect. If you don't want it, don't pass an ordinance. That's what we're left with.
So it's imperfect, but maybe the issue is not actually the council hearing the appeal in the case of an approval. And to what Councilman Dashman is saying, if the testimony was incomplete, if there was a gap in the testimony. When I went to the planning board meeting, look, I'm not taking a side on this, I'm just saying it seems clear that the focus is on safety. And yet, the expert's not present. And further, there will be residents who will look to the planning board and say, are you protecting us? Are you requiring this study? So, this ordinance, as I said, it's not directed to a project, but the project brings to light a concern.
You do have a remand ability. So hypothetically, if that situation did arise, there was an incompleteness issue, or it's something that this council did find that there was a need for it, the statute does say the governing body may reverse, remand, or affirm, wholly or in part, with or without the imposition of conditions, the final decision of the planning board. So there are
You can kick it back to the planning board with a concern and say, this is our concern, give them a chance to address that.
That could be.
Doesn't mean they will.
That's what a remand means.
Thank you for that distinction.
And I know it's been discussed before, but I feel like it would put a chilling effect on good development applications coming forward. I really do.
Again, we have ones that have been approved for years and they've gone nowhere, waiting for one project to take off or not take off. And so making all these approvals is no good. You're not throwing away projects because they're not building on them, and we're sitting on water and stuff that I can't sell to somebody else because it's tied up. I mean, come on, I know coming in here tonight that, yeah, we can't reverse the decision on the sign. That's not what this is all about, but I think there has to be a wake-up call somehow and make people aware. I mean, you're gonna make a decision, make a good decision, and really investigate it. Don't let 15 lawyers from New York City come out here and snowball you. And I think that's what took place out here. From what I heard, and people, I have had a lot of calls, and I don't go on Facebook, I don't have to. People tell me what's on there. And it's been a good scene. And I'm concerned that we're just letting, something is not right, and we're just let it fly. I can't see doing that.
So Frank, I have another question on the process if this were to be adopted. So, for example, Mr. Harris said he was at the planning board meeting. Right? I was not, Mr. Gorman was not, Ms. Peterson was. These were members of the governing body who heard the whole testimony, who were in the room. They've heard a different record, theoretically, than those who are just reviewing the transcripts. Does this mean that governing bodies members,
what happened in the room?
They see the color of what happened in the room, they hear tone, they hear tenor, they are going to experience those things different than, say, I'm reading a written transcript that Mr. Harris was in the room hearing those words.
They didn't vote on that lower project, they were able to consider it.
But what I'm saying is that it doesn't taint the process of the appeal
No,
if
because we
other
could have a
people were in the
council
room.
discussion about it
No.
and share.
No.
So everybody would be on the same page.
They can share their experiences with other members of council that weren't there.
I went because I was
exactly.
concerned and I wanted
Would
to
that,
know
would
what
that
I was
not,
very concerned.
would that not be introducing more to the record? So if
But
I
them
come
sharing
in-
their perspective, does that not add to the record?
No, I don't believe
Yeah,
so.
you can always watch it, so what's the difference?
Well, no, this ordinance doesn't let me watch it, this ordinance tells me I have to read the transcript.
Yeah, but you can,
You can watch it.
you can still watch
You're
it.
not
You
conflicted.
can watch it on YouTube.
You're not
Well,
conflicted.
no, because if I'm to adjudicate an appeal based on only the record that it's given, I'm not supposed to go look at it in YouTube. I'm
That's
supposed,
the- that's
I'm,
the-
I'm only supposed to hear what the
Then we're not
testimony
allowed
that's
to
here
go to
there.
planning board meetings?
Well, not.
Because
I don't
something
think-
might
I
come up.
think that, unless they're conflicted, they can vote. Unless they voted on the lower decision, they were on the planning board and they voted for it, I think they're out at the governing body level, but if they were just there observing, I think they're perfectly fine to consider.
The state law, the state statute are based upon, I mean,
I don't know, that's why I'm asking Frank,
you
'cause I
know,
don't
this
know
is
that.
why they remove,
I mean, those are issues you cross when you get an appeal. You have to figure
But I'd
out.
rather us not
but
pay
how
more
about we
lawyers, I'd
don't,
rather us
yeah,
adopt
how
an
about we
ordinance.
don't,
That's-
encounter
puts in
that when we
jeopardy.
get
That's
to
all
it.
your decision.
That exposes us to a good amount of litigation,
It's gonna be a time and money commitment.
I mean, time and money commitment.
It would make hiring a traffic expert to come in seem very
Well,
cheap.
that's the way Betsy does.
If I was to have gone to that meeting, would I have been allowed to speak?
At the planning board meeting? Don't count on it.
It's part of the public
So
hearing.
why should I go and waste 15
Councilman
hours,
Harris.
as you said,
Yeah.
you know? And even sitting here, it's almost like I'm wasting my time.
I mean, I'm asking Frank for the lawyer because what I learned was that governing body members keep an arm's length distance from anything having to do with the Board of Adjustment because of this potential for appellate questions. And the fact that, so let's say the planning board had voted to deny the application for, whatever, it's outdoor LLC. And they appealed to this body. The fact that Mr. Harris, for example, spoke at the meeting and his testimony was on the record and Ms. Peterson was present at the meeting, can they hear that appeal?
I believe they can. There may be
You look at
objections to
your book. I
them
think you're
hearing it, but.
wrong. I actually think you're wrong on that, Frank. I mean,
Well, that's gonna
you've got the pink
that-
book there, why don't you?
That's gonna depend. Say, that's gonna
Because that's
depend.
my understanding, based upon what I have learned, and I mean, it's not just that as I've been mayor, but previously too. You know, Councilman Harris brought up, I obviously was very concerned about the hearing with the courthouse square stuff as well. Not that this would be affected, but in my research, you know, if there's a D variance and this is in effect then, I don't think anybody can go to a planning board meeting where there's a D variance.
It's not
Because
advisable to
otherwise-
do that because you're gonna raise those objections. You're gonna have the applicant saying, I want this person excluded, and if this body rules against them, they're gonna go to the court and they're gonna say there was a member that was tainted. That's what we're saying.
Thank you.
So the advice is always steer clear of those conflicts, and it is gonna limit council's ability to go to these, or even, they're gonna have to stay arm's length away, because you're gonna have those arguments made. I may not think it's a conflict, but the applicant's gonna raise it, and when they bring it to a court, they're gonna say there was a tainted member. There was a member that spoke at the planning board that was against it, so how can I get a fair shake at the governing body?
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah,
Or
that's-
four.
We're gonna have
that's
those
the
issues.
situation.
They're gonna have all those issues.
That's
If
the
someone
situation.
comments on social media about it, that's gonna come out. So you're gonna have that.
Yeah, just point of clarification.
More than messaging.
Position rather than
Understood. No,
observation.
it's just an example.
It spoke to a solution.
Hypothetically.
The last time I went to a meeting, the planning board, they looked at me and said, why is he here? You know, and they were like being very careful what they said. I felt that, I saw that, and I left after. I was, you know, I didn't want them to think I was there spying on them. I was concerned about something that was coming up, and I felt I should just leave.
But yeah, but that's, I mean, this is the public and the political climate that we have in this town right now. And,
I'm talking about 10 years ago.
I know,
Yeah,
I
well,
know, I was going back a little bit,
so-
but, and I agree, but I appreciate your
So-
perspective.
Has everyone said anything? Because at this point, we're just getting into repeating stuff, and it's 10:20, we got this gentleman here from Turkey Trot, hoping he'll get a street closure, and there's still a bunch of stuff in front of him. Has everybody had their say?
Well, I would just add to that, you know, is it perfect? Are there things it doesn't do? Yeah. Have I read an ordinance that is perfect? No. But what it does do is it allows for when there's a D variance, if someone wants to put an 8-story building in front of your house, in front of your porch, that affects your family, your livelihood, your health, and I'm just using 8-story building as a reference, not to Courthouse Square. But what it does allow is it allows a mechanism in place for that person to have a voice, and I think that's important.
You guys ready to vote on this?
Say is there were, Frank mentioned that there's a point where we can send it back to them.
I thought that was very important. Thank you for pointing that out.
Shelley, hold up.
You guys ready for that? Okay.
Please.
Okay, this is to approve the ordinance. Mr. Dashna?
No.
Ms. Giles McCormick? No. Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Okay, passes 4-3, or 4-2.
4-2.
Okay, terrific.
Motion. I would like to propose that we change the order to move turkey trot next. And I would also state that in light of our executive session regarding the Beacon study, I won't make it, I will not be making a motion for that to be heard.
The 2004? So, two items, that's.
Yes.
2019 to
Okay,
I'd
so
like to move 211 next.
Okay, actually, that's just remove if you wanna withdraw 2019-204.
Yeah, I'd like the record to show.
Do you want to make a motion to withdraw?
Right.
200 for the financial impact
Based on the
study?
obligation I have from this evening's executive session, I'd like to make a motion to remove 2019-204.
Is there a second on that, Chris? Okay. Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson McCormick? Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, please make sure that the record does show that reference to the executive session. And then I'd like to make a motion to move resolution 2019-211 turkey trot street closures for November next in our agenda.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
We have a motion to adopt 2019-211, turkey trot street closures on Thanksgiving Day.
Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
May we allow the gentleman a moment if he wants to make a statement?
If you don't mind, thank you, Michael
Thank you.
Scotchek from CEA.
Can you
Thank
say
you.
your name and?
Michael Scotchek, CEA, Flemington, actually we're in Township really. Thank you again for the 27th time for the council and the mayor to, and the citizens of Flemington residents for letting this happen. We get better and greater every year, and it couldn't be done without you guys and ladies, Public Works, Police Department of course, and certainly the Flemington Emergency Squad. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you Thanksgiving Day.
Thank you, thanks for your patience. See you on Thanksgiving.
See you.
I'm not gonna hang around.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Boy.
You can't go in.
So we're back
Now
up
you
to
did it.
2019-207 is authorizing the mayor.
Can I make a point?
Don't you have to
Please.
vote?
Mr. Dashna said earlier that this was the first reading
This is
on
the
these
first
contracts.
reading.
There is only one. This is a resolution, this is not an ordinance.
Okay, so
Is this not a first reading of the resolution? to
This is
send
not
it
a
again?
two-resolution thing.
it's not, I thought it was.
No, I thought it was too.
I'd like to move to table.
Well, wait, can you just let me
Find out please if you
double
could.
check something?
Do you have to vote on the turkey trot resolution?
We did.
Yes, we did.
I'm sorry, I missed it. I was
We-
writing.
We actually acted pretty fast.
You guys, you're getting good.
We hope you're.
We're getting good at it.
While Sally is gone, could somebody explain the procedure for these two contracts? Because I think the public should have
That's
knowledge.
why
Well,
she
we're
went
finding
to go
out,
find
please.
out.
Yeah, we're not in a public hearing on it.
We live in 207?
Yes,
207 and 208. I thought it was the two resolutions.
that's what I was, but I could, if it's another word.
I think it's a, I think it is a, it's gotta have 2 readings.
That's what you had said before, John, that's where we were kind of going with your memory on that.
Yeah.
And I know when we discussed this with the others, with the DPW stuff, they were.
They remember being 2 meetings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember 2 meetings from 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That we, it was introduced, and then we scheduled the date for the next one, and then we had a public discussion.
Right.
and
Yeah.
That's what I was operating under.
As we said, we introduced it, then we'll find out.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to.
Yeah, that was the idea, so then we have a public hearing.
But in 2017, when this was brought to council, it was not on the agenda, it was added,
2016.
it was added to the agenda.
It would have been 2016.
Career
Contract. Unless it was done after the first one.
It was done after the first of the year, it was done during 2017, July or September.
Was that
Maybe it was July
Oh, because we
23rd.
got tied up with
I
lawyers.
remember it was July.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, yeah, because.
But it was
But I
not,
could've sworn it was
it was
2
not on the
meetings.
agenda at that time. It was added to the agenda.
Oh, was,
Yes,
well,
it
maybe
was.
because it was, I guess maybe we weren't, we were dealing with it week after week, so we reached the point where,
We passed this.
I'm sorry, I guess I shouldn't just be chatting.
No, we just need clarification.
When we approved Teamsters contracts in 2017, we did it on
Check it out, because this is.
July 24th, 2017.
It was one meeting?
This is for the DPW, and they did this one.
And there was, and.
I'm gonna double check the agendas from, well, no, I can't.
It was added to the agenda in July of 2017.
They got the study.
I guess you looked it up.
Yeah, but
No, I remember
It was
being-
added, and then there was another meeting. I remember speaking about it at the next meeting.
She said, that the different report was received.
No, I'm sorry, I think whether, I might remember. I just swear it was 2 meetings.
These are the public now, because people just pay us, we don't even look at the percentage.
Yeah, I'm looking just general for
John said they have to have a hearing.
Jersey labor laws.
Do we want to gavel a recess while she's looking this up?
You wanna take a 5-minute recess?
Let's
Mr.
Sally.
And then make a motion to go into a 5-minute recess while Sally looks that up.
Thank you, good call.
Well, you almost look like you're leaving. Getting much.
This is leaking, though. I gotta
Oh,
go
really?
now. Yeah, that big mess that happened. Gotta clean it up. It's gonna do the 32 days. It's 3 stories. And they can't have any buildings higher than 75 feet.
Thank you all for being here.
But we
Did I get the date right too?
Come on.
I said 23rd. Maybe
I
I said
have
23rd.
no idea.
Yeah, I remember. I remember very good news cough shit was wrong about it.
Everyone else.
Something I was to tell you.
I don't know. Weary.
What did you fall down?
Good.
My daughter's garage.
See a real application.
Step and fell flat into the concrete. And my knee got it, and my shoulder got it, and my elbow
There's no.
Five
5:45, you gotta leave?
Well, no.
Yes, wait up.
I actually don't have it that bad. It's like, I'm only about 25 minutes. Some days I do. Tomorrow maybe one of those. Depending on what time we get out.
And there's emergencies.
And then three-story, you can be in.
You are?
There's still 135 foot.
Right.
Yeah, how come?
Yeah.
It's tough for my family. I don't know if I
Oh, no, I said no, we go.
Resolution
So they have. That, how about that impossible?
There is not
I didn't know anything about I just eat lots of green peas. We'll see.
Here's the discussion on the agenda resolution.
Oh, I got one of those.
They might have, yeah. They've been putting them
Somehow I
everywhere.
got one of those at home.
They've been putting them everywhere.
Yeah, she gave them out last meeting.
Oh, is that where I got it?
Yeah.
Just
I really took it home.
it's a liquid, and you shake it
Because I
up,
saw
you put
it
it in
too
the
on
pan,
other
and it
stuff.
scrambles, just like an egg.
That it tastes like an egg?
It doesn't have as eggy of a taste to it, which I actually like.
I was just gonna ask.
I can try.
One vote? All right, so, good job.
What's this?
So, you look at the minutes, it's one vote.
I think it's just the natural of vegetarian.
I don't know. Thank you for giving power.
The more you learn about her food
Well,
She is, so he has to. Oh, she has a whole, yeah, they just are. But she has a whole How about they go to Japan?
That's tough.
He would have talked all night until he knew he was gonna get the votes. It was just terrible. It was. As the chair of the planning board, you don't tell people how to vote.
You're right.
I understand that your hair is oh my goodness. What did your girls say about that?
They want it. They're like, no. No, but I was trying to visit hairstylist and I was just like,
Yeah, they do provide
something. So I let her do, I said I can't be horrid, but other than that, you do whatever you want.
One of the biggest trends in food
Blue,
is
yeah, that's not bad.
vegetarian, vegan,
And it's not right on your
Vegetarian, you
face.
can have eggs.
Vegetarian's pretty easy.
And you can have cheese, and it's hard, because
The biggest thing I miss
is really important. So there's been a few times where I listen to Todd and I appreciate him like kind of explaining anything
Not
from
even-
that,
not even-
but.
Salad?
That's to me over that kid.
Well, when you learn what they do to the bees, you realize it's really good.
I've had people vegan cheese, I think it's pretty good.
You think so? It's gotten better.
And I know.
I think vegan is better.
Well, I'm exposed to a lot of the only ones. The people that go there to be
Soy,
Potato starch.
Oh, okay.
It's not bad. So cheese. I go to a cheese store, it's a candy store. That's only when.
No, not yet, we're working on it.
Oh.
Not yet.
No.
Oh, yeah. Is that yours? Yeah.
Where's Mr. Harris?
Hey, Michael.
Mr. Harris, back in. 9 minutes and a half.
Are we back in? Back in?
Yeah, we're back in.
So Sally, how did that?
So if I could make a motion,
Sally checked the record, checked her book, and it turns out that's only one meeting for.
We thought it was two.
We thought it was
We
two
were given
meetings. We
bad
thought it was an
information.
introduction and then a hearing at the next meeting about, a discussion about the next contract. And we've kind of told folks, including members of the bargaining unit, that the time for, if they wanted to come and speak, would be at the next meeting. So out of fairness, I'm gonna make a motion to table both resolutions to the next meeting. And with the idea being that we will have them on the agenda and they will be hopefully adopted heard and adopted at the next meeting on November 18th, just so that everyone understands so that there's no question about the dates. But it's one vote.
That's fair, too.
It's a resolution.
Yeah.
For the election?
So it doesn't matter.
Okay, all right.
But that will be an opportunity for the public to hear what's being offered and to
Yeah,
speak.
I understand, we need to do it, I was just
The
thinking.
contract will not be public until it's voted on.
Right.
No, they need to be here if they were planning on.
Well, that was the thing, is I had a call this morning from Brian McNally of the PBA and said, we'd like to be there, and do I need to be there tonight? And I told him,
Yeah.
no, tonight is one, and then you really need to be here on the 18th, so out of fairness to the other side of the discussion, I would prefer if we could just, and that's my mistake, I was wrong about the process, I apologize about that if there's any confusion, but, if we
Yeah, I
could
was
do that.
confused too, and I think maybe because of our discussion with them that they.
We all thought it was two meetings, so,
Yeah.
but we will do it at the next meeting, and, and like I said, before, we're, that's what we're gonna do, so. So if there's, I made a motion to table, so if there's.
I'll second it.
Sally, call the vote on that?
Yeah, for both.
This is to table both resolution.
207 and 208.
Thank you. Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
This is tabled until the November 18th
18th
meeting, which will be held at the historic courthourse.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
I'd like to add to the record also, as I noted from my council comments in the beginning, my council report in the beginning, we are awaiting the county communications data, which my understanding is it only needs to be picked up and then it can be forwarded on to DCA. That has been available as of Friday, prior to the last meeting. Certainly this can be received and forwarded well before the next meeting.
Going on to the next item, resolution 2019-209. This is authorizing submission of a loan application to the USDA Rural Development Drinking Water Program. This is for the financing for the existing water tank improvement project in Raritan Township. This, as you know, has been going on for a few years, bonded already, the money's already there. Hey, Bill?
We also got an approval from the Raritan.
The application's been deemed complete, so we can talk about it. Can we have a motion?
Rural development.
Yeah.
A motion?
Oh, it's some of
Second.
Second. Did I verse?
Thank you.
It's all good.
So, what this is the loan application for the water tank project that was approved by council 2 years ago.
Yep.
2 years ago.
sorry about that.
It was bonded already,
September 11th, 2017.
and,
It's
so the process is going through with we're at the township planning board, and so this is just putting it forward to authorize the engineering report and loan application to the USDA for one of their low interest. Do you know what the interest is on those? On this USDA?
It's usually under 2%.
When will this become due? When will we make our first payment?
We're just applying for it, so.
But in terms of applying for it, at this point right now, even if we apply for it, my understanding is that it would not, a bond of the loan we pay for on an annual basis, and it would be the year after we actually take funds, is that correct?
Yeah, you draw, how it works with them is you draw down on the money as the project's going, and then once your project's finalized, you close out the loan, and then you start.
So this could be,
5 years from now.
this could be well,
No, not that long.
certainly more than a year from now.
Probably, yes.
Right, it just, residents need to be aware that when this was first done at that time, I believe the expectation was water rate increases based on the cost of the loan to be upwards of 20%. At that time, it was also stated that it was an emergency.
2 years ago. It's still.
All these people are gonna build,
Yeah.
that's what it's based on.
And that was my point, but this is ultimately for the benefit of development.
Actually, it's for the benefit of making sure we have water capacity,
Well,
also for a fire.
You got a 40-year-old tank
And
that
the 40-year-old tank.
you don't want that to start leaking.
Will certainly give us benefits. We'll be able to go between two different tanks.
Well, we're gonna build one and then empty the other one and repair it, clean it and all that. You don't wanna stay inside.
Yeah.
I'm sure we don't. Okay.
Okay.
Any other comment?
I wonder what happened to Mr.
Sally, if you could call the vote.
Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
I do want to know.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Okay, it passes.
Okay, next up is the Holiday Resolution 2019-210, Holiday Parade 2019 road closures. It's the same as it ever is every year. Holiday Parade is on December 8th. If we could have a motion,
So moved.
Second.
is there any discussion?
Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Our final resolution of the evening is 2019-212. This is amending Resolution 2019-19. This is when we hired Rob Martucci, and if we could have a motion, and I'll say a couple words about that.
Move.
So in 2019-19, we hired Rob Martucci of Van Cleef Engineering to be our borough engineer. Rob Martucci and Van Cleef have separated their employment relationship, which left us in a situation of having to perhaps take another Van Cleef engineer and then you pay all that knowledge up in or enforce a non-compete on this. I had long conversations with them, and we've got bids, contracts that have been awarded on Elwood, New Jersey, Highland there, which I don't think is going to happen this year because we're running out of construction season and the contractor would like to do it in the spring. But anyways, particularly with the water tank being open as an open application there in front of the Riverton Township Board and our needing to have him testify on that. So Van Cleef was very kindly released him from his non-compete so that we could be seamless in our engineering needs in town. Are there any other comments?
Two questions. The fourth paragraph, it states that we're employing the engineer at the rates per the contract. I would imagine that that contract has Van Cleef keeping part of those rates. So this is in effect a raise. And then in the fifth paragraph, we have not to exceed $500,000. Is that?
Yeah, that's I just took the wording from the original resolution and was changing the Van Cleef part of it.
Sure.
Okay,
Sally,
so
this is not
if
you.
it needs to say something different in the text than what it says, please let me
Yeah,
know.
and the engineer makes a lot of money.
Yeah, but we're not gonna, if we were gonna spend $500,000 in a calendar year, clearly we're not spending 500 in 6 weeks.
No, it's only the end of the year.
His hourly rate per the contract,
So why don't we just
$115 an hour.
Which was lower than he originally submitted in the RFP last year.
Let's just
That's
ask
the
the calendar.
2019
Yeah.
contract.
Yeah, and I got him down on that from like, it was like closer to like 130. I talked about
So-
150.
Thank you.
I'm quitting. Okay. Bill? Of the 500,000, so, but if there's a number, we can put a not to exceed in here as opposed to the 5, it makes sense, right?
Keeping with the budget.
Keeping with the budget, whatever was
Or
authorized.
just add per calendar.
We're not looking to change anything here, just.
No, we just want to
I
hire.
was just trying to
No,
say,
because-
Keeping the same
keeping him
personnel
on
that
at
way.
the
You have
same,
to appoint all over again.
Yeah.
It does say calendar year 2019, so.
Right, but this could also be read as in, he could bill us up to 500, which is clearly not the intention of what we wanted to do.
No, it's for the year.
And already it is
enough hours left
effectively a
to use
raise because the firm for which he works, that we were hiring him through, now the payment is passed directly to him with no pass-through
this is
fees.
not paying Van Cleef.
No.
This is-
No, this is not
No,
paying.
no,
Oh,
the point
so
is-
What I'm saying is
Van
Van
Cleef
Cleef was not doing this out of goodness. No doubt Van Cleef had a
No,
cut.
but they billed him at
Still
115
planning board.
and paid him $1.05 and kept the 10.
Right.
It doesn't matter, if the cost of the borough is still $1.15. That doesn't change it.
We've paid them so far 176,000. They have like 323,000 left of that.
We should be able to do this.
Okay, so I'm not even comfortable with 323 in there. I mean,
So 150.
like 150 is like, it would be crazy high, I mean.
It'd be crazy high, but is that all of it?
You
Or
got
is that
the,
just
you got the
Van Cleef?
testimony.
Hold on, so that's all Van Cleef, that also includes, Van Cleef does the planning board engineer.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it's not just.
Oh, the 500 was for Van Cleef.
Van
It's all
Cleef
of
as a whole, yes.
Okay.
So can we specify something under 500 as for one employee? I mean, we're in a situation right now where we have negotiated and are looking to vote on contracts for other employees. We need to give the same attention here.
How many weeks left in the year? 8, $15 an hour, it's 36,800. Can we say 50,000 or 40,000 and be done with it? And
So not to exceed 200, is that what you're saying?
No, not to exceed 50,000.
50,000?
Well, that's fine.
Just
Make that number,
take off
right?
0.
50, drop a 0.
2 zeros.
I just read the 500 as the total amount.
Right,
So
so
you're saying the 500 is from now to
well,
the
it
end?
could be misread,
It's
that's what I'm
on
saying,
here.
we wanna make sure that we're not gonna pay him, we're not authorizing him to pay him more than 50.
That was just a carryover
But it's
from the
a-
original Van Cleef.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
carryover. It's
So
the,
50,000.
I mean, yeah, but you gotta leave more in there because of the planning board too.
No, that's what I'm saying,
That's everything.
that's everything, so we leave that alone. What I'm saying is that I wanna make sure that we're only authorizing Martucci for no more than $50,000 at the rate that's negotiated at the 115. And then the planning board stuff's the planning board stuff. And that contract with Van Cleef Engineering doesn't change.
No.
No, that,
But it all comes out of the 500.
no,
Correct.
No.
Well, it's-
No.
well, not all of it, because some of it's
no,
the
the
planning
planning
board.
board has its own contract, its own resolution, I think, not to
You don't think
exceed.
they draw it out of that, 500?
Oh, I don't know.
Bill can tell us.
So the now therefore be it resolved clause,
Yeah.
it says not to exceed 500,000, should say 50,000?
Well, hang on a second, because that's also the planning board.
No, you were having two separate contracts basically now. You
Right.
still have the one with Van
Yes,
Cleef.
Van Cleef is
Right.
still approved for the 50.
This is retaining Robert Martucci as municipal engineer
For the remainder of the calendar
for
year
the
to
remainder
perform the
of
services
2019.
and receive such compensation not to exceed $50,000.
Can we actually make a motion to introduce it as a new resolution rather than amending? That we're gonna hire
Yes.
Rob Martucci of Martucci Engineering Associates, if he's given himself a name, as borough engineer from now to the end of the year at a rate of
115.
115,
Not to exceed.
not to exceed
50,000.
50,000. Can we do that as a new resolution
Yes. I think
rather
we
than
need to.
amending?
Yes.
Yeah, why
Does it
not?
need to be done at this meeting or can it be done for the next meeting?
Well,
Oh,
no,
we
we
don't have an
need to
engineer
do
right
that.
now. We need an
It's
engineer.
not working for us right now.
Because otherwise we can't go to the.
I would like to have seen it negotiated, something less than we were paying.
He got negotiated down to the 115.
You got negotiated down to 115 originally.
So Van Cleef feels more? That's what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Van Cleef built out,
That's not what I heard before, thanks.
I'm sorry, Van Cleef built out
It's like
cleric-
130 or 140.
It's like 130, 135, 140. Planning board clerical bills out at like 155. I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah. And if we go with Mr. Martucci through 2020, we can negotiate that down. But without him here, sitting here in
Just to
front
get
of
us
us,
to the end of the year.
this is just get us to the end of the year.
I wish they were rushing out. No, we almost didn't have.
I can just do a break.
Yeah, it really almost didn't happen.
I apologize, that's my misconception, I thought I had to amend the previous resolution.
So do we need to withdraw?
You
Yes,
could
or
withdraw.
just
We can withdraw.
amend this?
Why don't we just amend this to say, because then we would have resolution 212.
It'll be, you
Strikes-
could do resolution 212 and just make it, rather than amending resolution 219, just say appointment
Appointing.
of Robert
Exactly,
Martucci.
exactly what I was gonna suggest.
That's fine.
Yes.
So we'll say
For
appointment
remainder
of Robert
2019.
Martucci of, I think it's Martucci Engineering
Martucci Engineering
LLC.
LLC.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
It is.
And we checked, he got his insurance in place?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so it'll be, resolution 212, appointment of Robert Martucci of Martucci Engineering LLC as Borough Engineer for 2019. And the terms will be a rate of $115 per hour, not to exceed $50,000. And this is for the remainder of calendar year 2019.
Perfect.
Okay.
So, can we withdraw, so do we have to withdraw the motion or not? And then reintroduce or not?
Well,
I think we can amend this.
I think we just amended that, you
Okay,
can
okay.
amend this motion.
So I'm gonna move to amend 212 as you just
As you just
said
stated.
it.
It already says amending resolution.
We're gonna start the words amending.
Taking
It's getting very bad.
I know, that's where I was getting.
Who seconded that? I'm
I
sorry.
did.
Okay.
Can we call the vote?
All in favor of amending the resolution? Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson McCormick? Ms. Peterson? Yes. Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Those to amend. Okay, then can we have a motion to adopt the ordinance, or the resolutions amended?
So moved.
Second.
That way I won't mess up.
All right, Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson? Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
He's gonna run.
Alrighty.
That brings us to our second public comment session, again up to 3 minutes each. Ms. Stewart.
Lois Stewart, Flemington Borough. I'm wondering, does that make Mr. Martucci a borough employee?
No,
He works for himself.
it makes him a professional, like,
Okay, so we don't have to
attorneys are
worry
involved.
about social security and all that kind of stuff. Okay, the second comment.
This is problem.
The second comment I have is in response to the mayor's request that we settle. The Friends are not trying to be anti-redevelopment, as I assume the members of council who in your letter are accused of being anti-redevelopment. We want appropriate development for this town. And I just would like to bring to your attention, so that perhaps you could share it with Mr. Cust, that in Raritan Township, on Route 202, which is a 4-lane highway, they are seeking approval for a Holiday Inn. And the Raritan Township, as I understand it, the Raritan Township ordinances permit buildings only 2.5 stories tall or 35 feet maximum height. So they're seeking a variance for 3 stories, and it would be 32 feet, so they would be under the footage that's required by the township, but they would get 3 stories. This is on a 4-lane highway, not in the middle of the historic district. If you would just get Mr. Cust to do what is right for this community and not what is just right for his pocket, things might move along. But he has got to realize that he is in the middle of a historic town, and we are not going to accept unless the court forces us to. We are not going to willingly accept 6 stories in the middle of our town.
Mr. Previtt.
I would say that a hotel is a temporary accommodation. What we're talking about here is residential people that own
This is a
and
hotel.
live, and it's
I'm sorry, wait a second, were you not done?
She's not done.
This is a hotel, I'm just saying, this is a hotel.
Hang on, I'm sorry, Tony, I thought Lois was done.
This is for a hotel, which is what we are getting across the street. And this hotel is proposed at 6 stories, and that hotel on a 4-lane highway is proposed at 3 stories. What doesn't our redeveloper get? What doesn't Mr. Previtt get?
Are you done? I don't want to take your time away. Mr. Previtt.
a highway frontage, probably the extreme differences in what what Holiday Inn wanted, what Raritan Township wants to see on a highway versus in town, mixed use, retail, okay? And again, permanent residences, besides a hotel, I don't see how you can compare the two. It's apples and oranges. And again, trying to compare highway frontage to like I say, a very creative and needed mixed-use development in a town that is basically, there's nothing here. Population density is leaving, there's no replacing it. There's no other choice here, logically. Ask anyone that tried to put a business on Main Street in the last 3 or 4 years, going back, there is no foot traffic. So you're gonna sustain Flemington and the taxes and the rateables on a few events in Flemington and a reconstituted gas station, okay? Right, Lois? That's what you're planning. A hotel on a highway versus our situation here, okay?
Retail is dead, Tony.
Hang on, Tony has the floor.
It's not.
He addressed me, he said I was.
Again, it's only part of it, and it's not the customary retail that you're thinking about. But again, it's apples and oranges. And you're gonna throw everything up against the wall and try to make something stick. But again, we're dealing with reality. We're dealing with rateables. We're dealing with a town that demographically, again, has been going one way and only one way. And again, you're not gonna get everything you want, Lois. You're not.
You talk to us, not to Lois.
And the borough is probably not gonna get everything it wants.
They won't even say.
But at the end of the day, you have to do something. And at the end of the day, Jack Cust is the only one here proposing something for us to deal with in a realistic sense. And like I say, I think we should just declare an impasse and get this going. It'll go on forever, Lois. You're that type of person. You're a small group. And like I say, this borough is a laughing stock in terms of its ability to do something and to get things moving here in the county seat, okay? Which again, population-wise, it's going the other way. So again, a hotel on a highway versus what's proposed here, come on. Apples and oranges, even worse than that.
And you have no right to say, I'm this type of person, because you don't even know me.
Lois.
So keep your mouth shut.
Lois.
Well, he has no right to say this type of person.
Lois. Take it outside and go argue with him outside in that. Joanne?
Okay, Joanne Braun, Raritan Township. Apples and I just want to just say, the point is, a highway location can handle 6 stories. We're a little teeny Main Street, and it is a small Main Street. I don't care what anybody says. There's a huge difference there. That we're not saying it's, just imagine, take a model of a 6-story hotel and then put it on the highway. It's like nothing, and you put it on Main Street, and it's huge. But I don't understand why Mr. Cuss doesn't get it. And I'm going to say it to you guys because I know you have communication with him. I personally since he has lied in the past to me, to my face, and in public, I don't trust him, okay? He keeps putting out changes, they look like they're changes, they're all pretty and glossy, but why doesn't he get it that, do you guys know how many apartments were approved for the master plan? How many was the maximum? Wasn't it,
Don't know, off the top of my head.
what was it, 100 and something? What was
The
it?
previous plan, whoever that was, said 164, and that number of 164 was questioned.
That was questioned, okay, I just needed to get the number.
Yeah.
But, so, when you're going to present a new plan, why not make it a meaningful reduction, like meet us halfway or something? Instead, it's just the same plan, take something out, put something in, shuffle it around. It's still huge, it's still too dense, it's still too tall. I just don't understand why he just doesn't get it. And he's not making any meaningful concession. But then he'll throw the small group under the bus in front of everybody and try to shame us as well as other people. What is it? Like, what do we, I mean, this is like a battle cry that I've repeated for years. Same exact battle cry. We haven't changed our goal or anything like that. There's no meaningful reduction in his new plan. None. It's the same shuffle, it's the same exact puzzle mixed up and shuffled around. There's nothing, it looks different a little bit. Yes, the 3 buildings are saved. I'm very grateful for that. But there's no meaningful reduction. And I have another question. What's happening with the back of the hotel and that? Maintaining the ordinance. Can you answer?
It was done what the County Board of Construction Appeals told them to do.
I don't think it has. I was at a
You should take that to
hearing
them.
and it
You should
hasn't.
take that to them because the owner appealed and so that overrules anything. Is there anyone else who has not spoken? Ms. Gorman, would you like a rebuttal?
Excuse me.
One other comment.
Yeah, I'll give you one other comment, Tony. But everybody else gets one other comment then too.
Yeah, we can get another comment.
If he gets another one, you get
Go
one.
ahead, go Tony.
On the Captiva situation over here, I missed the last presentation. Is there gonna be another sort of like public hearing or something with that?
It's done.
Yeah,
It's done.
eventually, no, it has to go through the whole thing, so that's an
Yeah.
area in need of redevelopment, so, you know, the redevelopment plan is there, but he needs to be designated redeveloper, there's a whole lot of steps, so.
'Cause I don't know, the way I interpret it now, with some of the renderings, a little revised, I kind of agree with Marcia Carroll about the apartments, you know. North End, we got plenty of apartments, like I said before about, you know, townhomes. But really, I personally don't want it looking like another Herman Capp building. You know, I mean, we got one,
Pretty ugly.
yeah, you know, bookends, you know. So like I say, you know, creativity and, you know, it's just something. I've been around long enough to see it. I said, it looks like another Herman Capp building, so that's all I got to say.
Anyone else
I
want
just
to?
want to make sure I understand what your objection to that is. You don't like
I don't think-
the building, the size? What is
I
it
just
exactly?
think, you know, when you got new development and, you know, you need a developer in there, like, be pretty picky about, you know, what you would like to see there. I mean, between renderings, you know, with past consultants, you know, what you saw there versus what he's presenting, it's like, you know, I don't wanna see apartments. You know, but I don't wanna see like, you know,
Why
stuff
not?
looking like.
That's what the market is, Tony. The market's not there for townhomes or single
Look what's proposed on West Main Street in Clinton. Look at the architecture.
It's lovely.
Well, like I say,
Why don't you send us a proposal and build it?
first person that walks in, I really didn't get a good sense that these guys were, you know, at all.
It's been,
Tony, we went out for RFPs twice.
yeah, it's been designated
I'm
for.
sorry, that sounds very much like something our former mayor would say. I was more interested because I really wanted to understand what your concerns are, because it would appear to me, sir, that while you're saying, hey, let's go forward with this project, you're saying, but not in my backyard.
No, I'd rather see a park there than what's proposed.
Well, I'd rather see it.
I would.
Well, I'm sure Lois would rather see a park on the other side of Spring Street,
Yes.
Tony.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so if you're gonna say something like that, that shows that you need to get some empathy.
No, it's just
Put
vis-a-vis.
yourself in her
It's
shoes for a
vis-a-vis
moment.
what you offer, and if you can't offer it, just make it green. You know what I'm saying? It's like Steve's store, make it a dog
I thought,
park.
but that's not
My
a
property
rainbow then.
value would go up.
Tony, that's not a rainbow.
What's that?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm just like, I'm not trying to be smart, I'm sorry.
Lois, yeah, we're all getting tired, we can have one more comment.
And they still have an exec session.
Lois,
I just wanted to
we have an
respond.
executive session still too.
I know, and this will be very short, but I just wanted to respond to your comment about the Board of Construction Appeals, or whatever their official title is.
County Board of Appeals.
We went to that meeting, several of us, the last one that was announced that they would be considering this item, and the other side was not there, and so we approached the chair and spoke to him, and he said that as long as your Flemington Borough zoning officer was happy, they wouldn't require him to do anything more.
Lois, it has to do with money, because in order for them to get up on the roof, it's gonna cost anywhere between $200,000 to $400,000 to put in supports, okay? And Jeff has those drawings from the redeveloper, and he just thought that that would be too much to ask for.
Well, but
And-
our ordinance doesn't say that
Well,
financial and economic considerations will be taken into
Well,
consideration. It
I
says you have to keep
understand there's
your.
no cap in the ordinance, and, however, I was told that in this case, I had to go with his discretion on his decision.
Well, I think though that the borough council, who is his employer, could give him direction.
So,
And-
well, we
and
actually
so-
did have an executive session over it.
So
What?
I do not see that we should absolve the owner of that property of his responsibility to keep it in good repair,
Susan
just
has
because
some issues.
Mr. Klein
Oh.
thinks that's too much money. And so it's not up to the Board of Appeals, Construction Board of Appeals, or whatever they're called. It seems that it's all in Mr. Klein's lap, and since he's your employee, then you could give him some direction.
Thank you. Anyone else want a second stab at the apple?
Joanne Braun.
That's okay,
You have to stay that we're done tonight.
Really
Before we
quick,
start our
really
exec
quick.
session.
I just want to know, and I'll just throw it out there,
Just-
because this has been on my mind for a while, but I keep forgetting to ask, and you might not have the answer tonight, but what's going on with the Flemington cut glass? Because that's the park right across the street from our property.
That's one of the 4 places I was talking about. The guy did this, and we're all sitting back waiting for something to happen.
But how many years more do we have to wait?
I don't know, it could be 20. We're waiting for a
No,
hotel.
no, there's a limit.
He's in his last year.
He's in his last year, he doesn't have any more
He got an
extensions.
extension and that.
So this was his last year,
That's
Pretty
extension.
sure.
and then he has to do something or leave?
I
No, I
think
don't
he
think
can
so.
get
Doesn't have
another
to do
extension.
anything.
He doesn't have to do anything,
Doesn't have
but
to do anything.
unless they amend the Permanent Extension Act, which has been amended for the last, 6 years in Trenton, maybe more than that, his approvals expire unless he comes in under the Permit Extension Act and asks for a 1-year extension. So if Trenton acts on it, I think he might be able to avail himself of that, but absent that, the permit, approvals expire.
When?
1 year, 1 year
Well,
from
no,
when?
it's
Whenever he
five-
last came in.
It's 5 years on approvals,
5
but
years.
then but it's been extended for years and years and years, and that 5-year clock didn't start right away. It's more complicated, and I don't wanna speak with incomplete information, but he's coming up towards the end of what is allowed for extensions, if memory serves correct.
Okay,
He may be up on his last year.
thank you.
Could you check that out, please,
Is-
Mr.
is-
Donovan?
Yeah, I can see,
Yeah, that would be, thank you.
it's planning board, but I can ask.
Is there an attorney's report?
No.
Payment of the bills?
I just have a question regarding the bill pack that was distributed dated
That was September.
9/23.
Yeah, so
9/23.
Susan had it signed.
Yeah, Susan Noribai, we just have bills that are marked as void. I want to clarify that.
You guys all emailed back and forth about that with Bill, remember? There was an email back and forth. This is an older one. Susan hadn't had a chance to sign it.
So it is voided here, the attorney's bills here that were voided,
Correct.
not apply to this. Thank you.
Yeah, that was the revised.
That was what was, yeah, revised.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question about the current bills?
Do you have the current bills?
Susan, please.
I'll go print that out for you, I'm sorry.
I'm not.
I emailed it to everybody, but I didn't print it out,
Okay.
so. I'm sorry, was that it?
I can look at it on just.
Okay.
Well, I just had a question about the $320 bill for the boarding of Jackson Keto. I thought there was gonna be no associated cost with regard to keto. That would be on the borough tax.
But you would, yeah.
Those are the 2 dogs.
Oh, boarding.
Yeah,
I thought it was underwritten, I agree.
yeah. Is it something that's gonna be reimbursed? I ain't getting much else to my memory, like you're worried about Amy's reporting or something.
Oh, each 2.
I can just move the money.
I know.
I mean, I can.
You took it out of the wrong one,
Take it out of the wrong pile.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming out of
It comes out of
You took it out of the wrong place in the police budget. There's a place where there's money coming into the police budget. It should have come out of that file instead of the other file.
Thank you for the question.
Hey guys, so we still have a meeting going on. Curtis,
Sorry.
if we do that to you, you'd call a point of order.
Absolutely, rightly so, thank you.
So does that satisfy your questions about the bill list?
Do we need to move to the
Yeah.
back side or?
Well, I do.
Because we're just gonna pay the bills and it's not.
Well, the one pocket, it comes from donations and the other comes from taxpayers. So this would come from the donation.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to pay the bills?
So moved.
How about second?
Second, okay.
Mr. Dashna?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman?
Yes.
Ms. Jones McCormick? Yes. Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Next up,
Council discussion.
11:15 at night, now we have an executive session before us. Is there any council discussion on anything?
I did have one thing, but they could wait. It's about putting recycle bins in town. They pay for them, they pay us to have them and all that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna suggest you talk to Councilman Runyon about that.
Yeah.
No, Chris.
Either way, same
You
meeting.
said down to Chris.
Oh, that's
It looks like we collect a couple $100.
Oh, yeah.
That goes to, the clothing goes overseas.
Yeah, the problem with those clothing bins is that
You get a lot more than
you get, and they're dump sites. If you
Well, I
look
know.
around town, they're horrible.
I think
If you
Chris,
listen to their description, they're gonna make.
Well, they make it sound
they
nice.
make it sound, oh, he tried to sell me, I got that same email. Yeah, because he tried to sell me at the
Oh, did he?
last year
Okay.
too, yeah. You know, the problem is they can come dump sites, our ordinance, we have clothing collection bins around town.
I can get all my clothing from there.
Does Miss Gorman hold you by the ankles?
She's been trying to get me to dump my stuff.
He makes me go.
So, hearing no other discussion, we have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
This is to retire into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters involving the property maintenance official and separately, they are unrelated, tax collector. No action is expected to be taken, we just have to discuss a couple issues going on.
No action.
No action.
But anybody that asks questions cannot leave till we adjourn tonight, permanently.
Mr. Doctor?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. McCormick? Yes. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
All right,
You didn't
we
call
are
Mr. Gorman, I
adjourned
don't think.
into executive session.